started. Call the meeting to order. Steve, would you like to lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. All right, roll call, please, Stacia.
Steve Jarvis,
Here.
Bill Miner,
On the phone.
Jim Peterson,
Present.
John Johnson.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. I'd like to ask if anybody has any conflicts of interest with anything that has been listed on the agenda. Hearing none, we'll move to the consent calendar. Approval of 4/14/2020 agenda, approval of 3/23/2020 minutes, and 3/25/2020 special meeting minutes, approval of claims, set hearing for April 27th, 2020, Twisted Pine, 216 Main Street, transfer retail malt beverage and South Dakota Farm wine license, and set hearing for April 27th, 2020, Twisted Pine, 216 Main Street, transfer retail wine and cider license. Any discussion?
Yeah, I'm kind of concerned about the attorney's fees. We've paid quite a bit out so far this year, I think. I think we allotted, what, $17,000 for the year. And I think we've already paid out over $11,000. And it's, what, 3 months, 3.5 months? And I think last time I said I was going to request emails and things like that to be able to go over, and I did. And I was told to come up here to City Hall, I think. I think I should be able to receive those because we keep things private. Whenever we have executive session, so I think we should be trusted with that information. Take a look at it before we come to the meetings because we're the ones that haven't okayed these charges.
I think you'll also be able to see the emails. Talbert, are you on the line?
I am.
Yeah. So we're discussing your bills, and first I'd like to say thanks for. I like the way you really put quite a bit of detail in your billing, so I appreciate that. And I don't know that this. I have a concern and have had a concern with how we access you, Talbert, or any attorney. And I have some questions for you. If do you have some questions, Steve?
Yeah, I guess my concern is how is it policed of when the personnel call the attorney, and I mean, I've been told that I can call him and get information. I don't want to, if I can get information from here, I don't want to call him and get the city charged for more attorney fees.
So, and I don't know if you were here, but maybe over prior to you coming, we had a long discussion about accessing the attorney, and how that came up, it doesn't matter. It was a good discussion, but it came up where the city council was supposed to come to this meeting and have a consensus before we accessed you. And I'm trying to make sure you hear this, Talbert, because there's some history here. And yet, so we decided that as a group we would come to the meeting and then develop our questions or whatever and send it to you because, you're a service provider for the city and you cost the city money, which ultimately is our constituents' money. And so this isn't necessarily a reflection on you, Talbert, so I don't want you to take it that way. I think it's a reflection on how we're accessing and using a city attorney services. And so I have some specific questions if you're ready to hear those.
Well, I'm certainly ready to hear them. but if there's specific questions about entries, I'm a little nervous about trying to explain research or consultations that were done and make those public.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, well, that's good. You can deny or whatever you want to do when you answer these, but, and I certainly appreciate that. As a council, we don't, and again, I want to commend you on your detail here, but there's a lot of questions and what this is all about.
Can I?
Yep.
Can I come in? If you're concerned about that, Talbert, I don't mind moving your bill down to the action items. But I question, why is he on the phone tonight why is he on the phone for?
So Talbert, is there an agenda item, first of all, for today that you should be here, you need to be here for?
well, my understanding, I'm sorry, go ahead. Cut somebody off.
No, I'd like to hear it from you first.
Yeah. Well, I'm jumping in. It's item B with the Boys and Girls Club lease, because there's a little bit of information that we need to talk about the, how we renew that lease and some logistics with codified law to make sure we're doing it right. So,
I mean, if you're if you don't want, if you think that what Jim is going to ask you is,
Well, it won't matter if it's now or later, because it's still public.
well, we can, maybe I'm jumping ahead, but we can always go to the action, have it put to the action items. Then on the action items, vote not to pay and to take it over until next meeting and have an executive session to discuss them.
Well, let me ask you a couple questions anyway, Talbert. On the March bill, there's an entry here on 3/6. It says receive and review an email from Danny to Peterson on PUD, receive and review the meeting packet. And it was a charge for $97.50. And my question to you is why I would have an email that, and the email was simply this, and I'll read it to you. Danny, please supply me with the communications that went out to the neighbors regarding the PUD that was just approved. And subsequently to that email, Danny provided me that information, and that was all good. And so I was privy to actually know how people were noticed, because I had some constituents that were complaining that they didn't know this and they didn't know that, and I wanted to know how we as a city noticed them and if they were noticed, and it turns out they were. So I don't have my response to a constituent like that is they should pay attention to the meetings and show up to the meetings if they have a problem. But I'm wondering why you and staff would have to, why that would have to get to you in an email. Do you have any idea why that was brought to you?
Well, I'm trying to see if I've got the email still in my inbox, so that might provide me some direction.
I can help you.
My general practice.
It was on March
Go ahead.
6th. The issue I'm having is I think there's an overuse of going to the attorney. And again, Talbert, this isn't a reflection on you, it's a reflection on our administration and our staff and how we're managing this. Because it's, at the end of the day, it's the constituents' money. And I know what attorneys cost. I know what you cost. I'm not at all reflecting on that. I'm just reflecting on why, and there's more in here like that, why, and the questions I'd like to answer, why something like that would have to be brought to you to discuss with you an email that I asked staff to provide me with something of that nature. I'm lost for words why that would happen.
So can I just comment at this point, Talbot, while you're looking for that. There's questions that are being posed here, and I don't believe that we have all the parties that are here that are able to answer those questions. I don't know what's being referenced. I don't know what's being looked at. This is the first time that I'm hearing that there's being questions that are being asked about specific things. So perhaps...
And, Mayor, let me just explain the billing practice that my office tries to follow.
Okay, thank you, Talbot.
And so the time entry includes the fact that I was copied on the email from Danny to Mr. Peterson in response, and I pulled that email up, and there was two PUD some attachments to that. And then the time entry also talks about the fact that I gotten the agenda and packet, and I reviewed that. Well, my general practice is that I try to note the emails I've received on the bill, even if there's a diminishment time during the day, or, as part of that whole billing, just so it's noted that I've received it and I looked at it at least quickly, if not all it takes is quickly, so everybody knows what I've looked at. And I know what I look at, quite frankly. So that entry might very well have been, most of that time would have simply been on the reviewing the agenda packet, making sure there wasn't any issue or something I had to follow up with prior to the meeting. But the fact that I got 2 emails that day would be noticed on the bill. So I try to be over-inclusive to make sure everybody sees knows what I've looked at, though I don't necessarily, I don't break out every second or keep every second of time split between, if I'm looking at 2 emails that are following close in hand for one client, I might just note that I received both emails rather than try to break out the time between the 2 of them.
So I appreciate that, Talbot. Like I said, I think you're doing a good job on the detail on your bills, and I certainly appreciate that. I'm wondering why a staff would have to send my email to you on a request for information out of this office, that as an alderman, and I'm being asked, why that would have to go to an attorney? Do you have any idea why that would?
There could have been a number of reasons. Perhaps Danny thought that there was going to be a follow-up question that I would have to answer, so I'd have the background on it. It's, those kind of types of information, keeping I represent a lot of different small governments. I totally appreciate that I'm an expense item, and I try to keep that expense down where I can. I totally, and everybody uses me a little differently. I wholly endorse having a standard practice of when you use a lawyer. As I think you said earlier, you have a right to contact me directly. The question is, as a council, as an alderman, the question is being cognizant of what's the best way to do that, because obviously if I had to explain the same thing to 5 different people in 5 different phone calls, it's going to cost you 5 times as much than if we can coordinate that a report to one person who reports it back or some kind of call. So I'm willing to work on all those bills. If there's a protocol that's preferred that the council wants, I'm willing to sit down and figure out what's a preferred protocol. There's just simply going to be times where somebody's going to, perhaps rightly or wrongly, perhaps anticipate there's going to be a follow-up question on this. I'm probably going to have to ask the lawyer, so I'm just going to copy them so they know what's going on. That's happened. That just happened.
Okay.
So,
once again,
Danny probably would be best to ask why she copied at that moment, or whether she thought there was going to be a follow-up and she wanted to make sure I had everything in my file.
And again, I see in here where you've essentially felt you needed to donate some time. So I appreciate that you're cognitive. I'm also cognitive of using an attorney's time and not talking to them or calling them on every little thing. And that's why as a group, as aldermen, we decided that we as a group should come together with our questions and then give them to you. That was something
I think
that,
that's a great practice.
yep, and I don't know that it's been followed, but that's what that meeting came out. Would hope it would be followed. Right before that is another entry on the 5th, Talbert, on your bill, and it says, call from the mayor and Brett concerning council member contact with Skull and question on development agreement and discussion with Brett on Boys and Girls Club lease. Can you let me know what that was about?
Well, as you say, I got some detail there. There was a call that covered various issues. I'm not real comfortable getting into all issues that would waive a privilege issue because you're covering at least 3 separate items on that call. And in all frankness, Alderman, I don't have my notes from that call in front of me. I generally take notes, which I'd want to review before I would get into anything on that anyway.
And I have probably at least 5 or 6 more highlighted items, so I'm sure I'm going to get the same response. I just object.
Yeah.
I just object to as a city, and I view it as mismanagement of how we access you when we are getting $3,000 and $4,000 a month bills. That I don't think we're an organization that needs that. And there's times where we're going to need an attorney, and there's times where I think we need to be, as a group, as an alderman, as staff, to be cognitive of what it is that an attorney, you, and filling in at the moment, cost.
Yeah, Alderman, if I could, I'd say a couple things in response to that. First, I can appreciate that the bill's been a little higher than maybe what you guys have had in the past. I think the service has been a little bit different first. Second, there's been some upfront cost just to get up to speed, which just happens whenever you hire any professional who kind of comes in the middle of something. There's been this COVID thing that's driven some bills over the last month and quite a bit of time where we've tried to work some things through that's impacting every city. And the other example, even on the TIF issue, while there's cost involved with that, given the experience I'd had with planning and working with TIF, I was able to modify the plan from what had been proposed and essentially almost agreed to include $5,000 on the back end the city will get to help cover some of these costs in the plan. So while there might be some additional costs there, I'm cognizant of trying to save and recover that for the city too, just based on the experience of going through that. So I wholly appreciate that I'm a cost item. There is a value though that cost item brings, I think, to the city, and I hope that the general consensus of the council is that my firm's been worth the cost, and frankly, if the majority don't believe so, I'd understand if you want to go a different direction.
Well, that's not really the issue at hand. I'm not suggesting that you're providing poor service or better service. We're talking about the access of a city attorney's services. And it's not really reflective of you because you're there to provide service. And if everybody's calling you on every little thing, I get that you're going to respond.
I would, Alderman, I have to say that I don't have a feeling in the work I've done here that anything that I've put any amount of time to as requested by Brett or anybody else on behalf of the city has been trivial. Quite frankly, there was an issue earlier this year that I felt was a trivial matter that I wrote one short letter to the mayor saying I don't think it needs to go beyond this because I think the costs of pursuing it would be unproductive. and not worth the time. And it had to do with an internal complaint. And I would be very quick to point out if I'm being included on a matter of trivial in nature, which does not take a lawyer, because.
Well, let me ask you a question in relation to that then. Does any city or municipality have any governing power over covenants?
A municipality, if you're speaking specifically of the Bull Run issue, the covenants issue was reviewed as to the Bull Run issues to make sure that the covenants complied and did some things for the benefit of the city and protected some things that the city was doing, and also to incorporate the fact that the PUD would information on the PUD would be recorded as public notice under the covenants, because the issues we ran into PUDs in other areas has been that people buy pieces of ground, the PUD is not of record, and they don't realize when they buy the ground that the PUD would restrict the ground in a way that they did not understand. So the review of the covenants was to protect that the PUD would protect the city.
So what governing power do we have over covenants? If you want to protect the city, wouldn't that be through the actual TIF and the PUD itself?
So many people are contacting him for different.
I'm sorry, who am I speaking
Whoever is
with?
could you please mute your phone?
Yeah, so the city's enforcement primarily is going to be through city ordinance and the PUD. The difficulty you get with PUDs that I've run into more than once is the PUD, when somebody buys a piece of ground and gets the title work, often the PUD is not disclosed or has no record. So the review of the covenants as part of that TIF was to make sure the covenants fulfilled the obligations of the TIF, and to make sure that that the covenants we included language that would make the PUD easier and more enforceable by providing notice of the existence of the PUD within the covenants.
Well, that particular line item is $624, and I also know staff did a lot of work on the covenants for a private development. I've never heard of that before. I also know that covenants, when somebody buys a property, as well as you know, in the title work, and it is a restriction. So they receive that when they buy it. And the PUD part of it, anyway, I struggle with all that because I feel like that's a private side of things and not the public. And I know the mayor disagrees with me. But
We seem to be going off topic here a lot more than we really should be. I think if this is something that you would like to speak directly with Talbot on, as he said, you have the ability to be able to do that. And it could turn out to be a matter of legal interpretation. I'm not an expert on the matter. That's why we have Gunderson, Palmer, Nelson, and Ashmore that are representing us. With that being said...
I'm sorry, Mayor.
That's okay, go ahead.
The Alderman's correct, and generally the city wouldn't mess with the covenants. The only reason we got into them on this matter was because it was tied in with the TIF and the development plan, and it was all part of the package, and we wanted certain language in there to make sure that the project went according to how the TIF and development plan was laid out, and in conjunction with the PUD. So I would fully acknowledge, Alderman, that it is generally what you'd see is somebody come into a subdivision, if they threw the covenants on, you'd say whatever the covenants say, they say, and our ordinance are going to apply anyway. In this situation, because of the TIF, it was a little bit funkier than that straight standard. So I hear you.
Well, I can't agree with that last comment of yours, and I get what you're saying, because this isn't the first TIF and it isn't the first PUD, and how it was done. I think if you want certain control, I guess is what you might say, then you put that in your TIF development, the whole package of the TIF, and you put it in the PUD. And the covenants are, but you know, when I hear staff is rewriting covenants and this and that, we're out, anyway, I have a problem with it.
So I'd like to stop the conversation right here, okay? I understand that you have an opinion, Alderman Peterson. You've made statements assuming things already that you've put
What am I assuming?
statements in my mouth that I have a disagreement when I have not made any yet to this point. So, right now.
We've had a
the
conversation in another
Alderman
meeting.
Peterson, if I can please continue to speak, I have the floor right now. All right. Now, the point that we're at in the meeting right now is we're reviewing the claims. If there are any other situations that you would like to discuss, right now is not the appropriate time to address it. I would suggest that if you have a strong feeling about something that you'd like additional clarification on, instead of using this as an opportunity to state assumptions about what was done or what people are thinking who are not here to represent their thoughts or what their actions were, that be taken up at a different time when it be more appropriate. Right now, we are here addressing the consent calendar, part of that which is approval of the claims, which is the legal billing portion of this. If there is something that's preventing you from approving those legal bills, it is up to you to look at that information, ask whatever questions and get whatever answers that are available to you tonight and make a determination what you're going to do with those claims.
I thought that's what he was doing.
And
He's getting into a level of detail where information is being asked that this is not the appropriate forum to do it. If there is additional information relative to work that is being done or work that has been done at the city level, or who did what, this is not the time to ask that. There are different areas and different times that you can do that. So, if you do not feel comfortable with the information that you have tonight to pay these bills, you need to make your decision that way.
yeah, well, I don't know what assumptions you're referring to, but it's clear, it's in front of me, I have the documents, so it is whatever, Kathy, but this is, if you want to just go forward, I can't support this until we know what this is about then, because I wanted to pay this bill, but I don't know what the other councilman. Bill, do you have any opinion on this?
Yeah, can we hear from Bill?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I have several concerns, but I wanted to start out with a thank you to Talbot. I just read a news article from, I believe, Connecticut, where the nightclub owner is suing the city mayor and the governor over the closure under the taking clause. And I remember you speaking about that at our meeting and warning us that our insurance coverage didn't cover the city for that kind of claim or loss. And so your warning and legal advice is coming true. So I did want to say thank you very much for that. My concern is twofold. One, as Alderman Jarvis, I think, pointed out, we spent over $11,000 so far. And while we have $17,000 in our 2020 budget for legal fees, $1,000 of that is for the Public Works Streets Department. $2,000 of that is for the Water Department. So really, the council budget was $5,000. The Development Services budget was $4,000. City Administrator $3,000, and Finance Officer $2,000, or $14,000. So $11,000 out of $14,000 budgeted for those four departments. We need, as a council, to figure out a way to control the legal bills, especially in light of our later discussion item about the financial impacts of the COVID. The other thing that I see is each of the bills is 4/10 of an hour or $78 to review the agenda packets for like P&Z and council. And I guess maybe we need to make it clear as a council what we're expecting. I recognize Talbot's trying to do a very good job, but if there's nothing on the agenda that requires the city attorney's opinion, then I'm not sure that we need to be having them review that. I went and looked at what other communities are paying. I looked at the legal bills for the city of Piedmont. I looked at the legal bills for the city of Whitewood. Obviously, each community has different issues and things going on, but the one that jumped out at me is Whitewood seems to have a $550 charge for city attorney each month, and then a separate charge that varies from $273 to $2,365 the last 4 months for additional legal services. And I know that's a city also represented by Gunderson Law Firm. So maybe we need to look at some kind of a base amount that Talbot would charge to review agendas and do things, and then extra. I'm just throwing this out because right now the bills are unsustainable.
Okay, anything else, Alderman Minor? Okay, thank you. Alderman Johnson, anything you'd like to add?
I think, well, I can't blame the city attorney everything, but I think the drop of the hat, this office is calling the attorney. I think there's a lot of resources out there that you can find out without calling the attorney at $195 an hour. I guess I agree with Jim, some of the things that was on the bill, I have no idea what they're on there for. Why were they researching about this damn thing that's sitting in front of us?
That's the reason why I asked to be able to see the emails, and also I could go ahead and get all this sorted out. That would have gave me a whole lot better idea of what was being billed, and the reason why these phone calls were being made.
So you asked for what?
I asked for a
Copies
copy
of all the emails.
of the emails, correspondence, because I would like to take a look at them and before I come in here. You know, and that would help me to know the reason why we spent $4,000 on attorney's fees.
Mr. McMacken?
So I just have 4 points to make, 4 factual points. Operationally, staff tries to make every document that we work on, we try to get it to the 90% done, 95% done, before we ever engage an attorney, whether it was Bettman Law, whether it's Gunderson Palmer. That has been our normal practice for 15, 20 years. So that hasn't changed, okay? What has changed is we do have a different law firm now. So under Bettman Hoag, we had budgeted in last year's budget, which now is in this year, 2020, based upon Frank's hourly rate, but more importantly, his flat rate for each meeting. If you go back in that bill, and you add up what the cost is per meeting, you're gonna see a big increase because we don't have a flat rate anymore per meeting, okay? So that's a big change. And so do the math on that one. The other one is the COVID-19 thing has come up. We needed Gunderson Palmer's assistance with putting that together and avoiding those pitfalls that Alderman Minor brought up with suing. The other thing that came up unexpectedly was the TIF. The budget was way in place before the TIF ever surfaced, before that subdivision ever got started. And so those are things that are outside of what we had budgeted for within the scope of our budget. We didn't budget that we were gonna not pay a flat rate for a council meeting for legal representation. That flat rate included time and travel to our city hall for what, $190 a meeting. The way we're under now is that it's a per hour rate, and that we're trying to have Talbot go over the phone so he doesn't incur any mileage costs for us. So when you see the bill for legal services, I think there's missing the mark here. It's all about the iceberg principle. You're seeing the 10% above the water, and the other 90% doesn't exist as far as legal services and questions and whatnot, because we're taking care of those before Talbot even sees it. There's 90% that's being done. We're being billed for the 10%. That's just facts. I don't know how else to explain it.
So can I respond to that? So Bettman wasn't at many of our meetings. He didn't need to be here. I don't believe Talbot needs to be here even on the phone at some of our meetings, at most of the meetings. And if they do, let's put them at the beginning and get it done with and get them out of here. And no offense to you, Talbot, it's an economic discussion. And so when you say, yeah, we know as an intern, his rate is higher. But that's why we're supposed to be continually looking for an attorney that fits the needs for Hill City. Okay, and then, because I don't know that we need a major attorney to run this town on a day-to-day basis. And then when you run into something different, maybe you go find that attorney to do it. I don't know. There's different ways to look at it. But to say that, Talbert's new and he's been on these meetings, but I think the last couple we've asked why he's been here.
That's right.
And again, Talbert, this is not a reflection to you. I hope you don't take it personally. It's a reflection on how we manage the people of Hill City's money in relationship to paying, $3,000 and $4,000 a month on your bills.
And you were told there's a specific reason why he's on this call tonight, and that's action item 7B. The only reason why it's B is because A is an approval of a malt beverage, which will not be very time intensive. So that's as close to the top of the agenda as we can get it. The intention is to have him here when we need him to explain something, and that's why he's at the top of the agenda. We've just taken all of this time to have this conversation about billing, which he also participated in.
Of course he did.
So one would think
part of
that
it.
he would be valuable being on this part of the conversation as well. So the thought to utilize his time wisely is there, and we are taking that into consideration. He is here because there is something that he needs to add his expertise into in the agenda today. But it isn't intended to have him here when it's not necessary to.
Well,
So with that being said, I'm going to pose that question again. Is there anything else that you need information on tonight to make a decision on the claims?
Well, I think we pretty much made a decision that the city needs to be more careful whenever they make the phone calls and whenever we get him on the phone here for our meetings. And all he's doing is whenever he's given a phone call, and when he's got a phone call, he just responds to it, and that's what he's there for. We need to do a better job in managing when the personnel sends emails or makes phone calls, and what we actually use him for. Again, Talbot, nothing against you or your firm. You've done an excellent job.
Okay.
But nothing personal, I understand. These are hard decisions.
Any other comments?
Brett, you said you had 4 items. Did you get through all 4 of those?
When his staff gets everything at least 90% ready to go before we engage the attorney at all. We've done that forever. Nothing has changed. COVID-19 came up. The TIF came up. So that's number 3. The other fact is the billing for the per meeting price is not a flat rate. Frank would be $190. He would all of his time to drive up here. There was no mileage. He'd be here for 3 hours, 4 hours. You got Frank for $200. That's it. So I agree with your statement about let's minimize Talbot's time. If we can put him towards the front of the agenda, that's great. But if we as staff need Talbot to be engaged in an action item, we need to be able to make that call so that you guys have the best benefit of information. And there's certain things that Talbot can convey a lot better than I can, because I can't play attorney by parsing out one section of the code that reads, once we get to this item, it reads one way, but there's case law associated to this item that only Talbot knows about. I don't have access to all of the case law stuff and to look down that path. That's why we need the expertise of the attorney to tell us when we're on the right path. So those are the four. I'm sure there's other ones, but those are the four main ones.
Well, you see, that's all I'm asking for, an explanation for what you just gave. I mean, just discuss with Brett, whatever. That's one thing, but I'd like to know, why is the city paying $500 for that conversation?
Sure.
And that's all I'm asking. And I asked for that and was not able to get it. I was told I could come up here and read it. No, I'm not gonna waste all day to come up here and read it. I mean, there should be notes being kept, there should be a file being kept, every month, what's going on, emails, everything. So if one of us requests it, we can get it.
Yeah, so here's what I would offer. If you have that question, call me, because I probably know when Talbot is engaged. That way we're not bothering Talbot with more bills.
But what I'm getting at is, what if Jim, what if John, what if Bill has the same question? I mean, you know.
Well, there's no transparency to the council. We don't know.
And you know, then we're making 4 phone calls to you, Brett, tying your time up. And we shouldn't do that.
Well,
Because
I work a lot cheaper than Talbot, no offense, but that's why I'm here, is to coordinate those things so it minimizes the cost. Once we push it to the legal world, it's gonna be a lot more expensive. You know, I'm happy to answer all the questions that come up, but, you know, I know that there's valid questions. All these questions are valid. I'm not sure that the forum, like what I think the mayor was getting at, that the forum is the most appropriate forum to get those resolved, but all discussion is good discussion. But I can answer most of those questions for you. And I'm happy to do so. But, you know, there are certain things that I need Talbot for, and I can't wait 2 weeks to get permission from somebody to engage Talbot. That's not how our job as staff works. If there's something crucial that needs to get on the agenda, and we've got to research it and address it properly, we've got to engage them.
I don't mind when you receive Talbot's explanation like we do for the charges. If you guys added on, if you felt like there need to be more explanation, just like what you're giving. I wouldn't mind, that would probably be fantastic, and that would probably be enough for me, just to see exactly what Talbot was talking about whenever he corresponded with you. Because Talbot, he can't spend all day long making one of these up, but you guys, you can interject some into that explanation to make it a little bit more thorough.
Okay.
I mean, that includes everyone. The mayor, when I see on there the mayor spent time with him, I don't know why she can't go in and give an explanation. You, Danny, Stacia, whoever.
I see what you're asking for. Operationally, it would be a lot easier just to sit and have a conversation over the phone or in person to go over it.
Again, I don't want to tie your time up if all 4 of us have the same question.
Yeah.
I mean, we have too many projects going on here in Hill City.
Okay, any further discussion or questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion, and your motion is to what, Alderman
the
Johnson?
agenda.
Approve the agenda
Claims.
and the claims. So I have a motion on the table to approve the agenda and the claims as so stated. Is there a second?
I'm second.
Second on the table. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please, Stacia.
Jim Peterson,
Yeah.
Bill Miner,
Yes.
John Johnson,
Yep.
Steve Jarvis.
Yes.
Okay, I'll approve, motion carried. Before we go into public comment, I know that we have the Pennington County Sheriff's Office on the line. Sergeant Harkins is on the line. I'd like to move that up before the public comment to allow them the opportunity to get back to protecting our town. So Sergeant Harkins, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Standing. Hello, everyone.
All right.
Hello, Sergeant.
Hello.
Hear me?
Hello, Randy.
Hello. So in the March report, you'll see we had three total arrests and 2 non-warrants for assault. And I also want to direct your attention to the hours. You'll see that we have a little bit more hours than we usually have, and that's because we've absorbed the school liaison officer due to the closure of Hill City.
Okay.
So he will. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. We're finishing that thought. Go ahead.
Yeah, so he will be with us in our rotation till probably mid-June, so you'll see a lot of deputies in town, so I'm excited about the coverage we're going to have.
Excellent.
Any questions about the report?
Anybody? I do not believe so. I do not believe so. Thank you very much.
Okay, the other thing I wanted to talk about, Council, was Deputy Jeff Andrews is leaving us in June. He's retiring. So we do have a replacement picked, and that deputy is Randy Southern. He's been with us for a year. He wants to work in a small town. He'd be a great fit. So I just wanted, if there's any questions or comments or concerns, I'd like to hear them.
Who is retiring?
Jeff Andrews.
Okay.
He's our day shift guy. He works straight days.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. And that deputy that, if he is chosen, if you guys are good with it, when he comes in, he will slide right into that rotation to the day shift.
And where is he coming from?
He's coming out of Rapid.
Out of
He's been
Rapid.
working in Rapid City. Out of our Rapid City office.
And when are you scheduling that to happen?
Middle of June.
So Sergeant Harkins, I have not heard anything specific to date. If I do, I will definitely reach out to you.
Outstanding. Is there any questions for me regarding anything, the report or the replacement of Deputy Andrews?
I don't believe so.
All right, y'all have a good night and be safe out there.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good evening.
Take care.
Thank you. Okay, now I'll go ahead and move on to public comment. Members of the public may speak on any matter that is not on the agenda, and remarks are limited to 3 minutes per speaker, so I'll look to the audience that is in attendance first, that of which we have 1. We have no public comment in the audience. Does anyone on the phone have anything that they would like to address? I would ask you to please clearly state your name if you do have any comments.
My name is Connie Walters.
Okay, Ms. Walters, go ahead.
Yes, I am asking the council to consider setting a soft opening date for businesses in this COVID-19 crisis that we have. In researching the last, 3 or 4 days, there's a number of states, some of the governors themselves are starting soft opens. Texas is one of them, Mississippi. Some of them are just opening areas that have a low count. In Indiana and some of those places there. California has 5 counties that is opening up, small counties like ours. And I think that we need to do the startup. It'd be healthy for our businesses. You're talking about finances today, what COVID has done for hurting our economy somewhat. And I think it's time that we're over the hump, especially in West River, and start opening it up with safety precautions. Please, no events. Still, kind of distance yourself in line. There's a lot of things that you can do like that, that a lot of these states are coming out with. But I think if we started with a date, the most common date I found was May 1st. So, and then summer, of course, after that, New York is going to be a lot different than that, of course. But I would just like to encourage the council to consider that, by the next meeting, or is this your second meeting?
It's the first
No,
one
this
in
is your,
April.
you'll have one more meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
That you could open it up. It would give some relief to our merchants. We're not experiencing the pandemic here as much. We have had some cases. We've had one death. It also was complicated by the person's medical conditions prior to getting the disease, the virus. But a lot of them were not even hospitalized. So they just, had the flu. So I think that's a severe consideration, and I'd like the council to address that.
Okay.
Maybe the next meeting and come with a date. Do more research. I have some stuff. I don't have everything, of course, and it's changing. As the president said tonight in his address, it is the governors that have to, the governors that put the restrictions down, the closed businesses, they have to open them. Our governor we're kind of in that safe zone. It's our city that will have to do that. So with that, I'll let you go.
Okay.
I don't need any discussion. It's just a request. I think we need to be in front of it. I've read that there's a lot of farmers that are considering not planting crops or disking them under if we wait until June to open up. Also, animal life, euthanizing. They're not going to pay for a cat, for a year to feed because they'll lose money just trying to sell it. So there's just things like that to consider too.
Okay. All right, thank you very much for your
Okay,
comments.
thank
Okay.
you. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Is there anyone else? Okay, no one on the phone. We do have someone in the audience. Please step up to the podium and give us your name.
It's Vic Alexander. Was just wondering, I guess kind of along the same line that Connie was, Connie Pelosi, Walters. Something along the line that she was talking about was related to the, as far as the city being closed down. We're not closed down, are we?
We are not.
We're not closed. We're following the CDC guidelines. We're following the stay safe and 6 feet apart and less than 10 people in a room and those kind of things. But there's a lot of Hill City that is open. So it's a choice that those businesses that have made that are closed, if their type of business isn't conducive to operating. But if you're following the CDC guidelines, the South Dakota Department of Health guidelines, there's a lot of Hill City that is open. Just to point that out, I'm not contesting that we want to get, I feel like going to Sioux Falls and catching the damn thing and getting everybody else infected so we can get it over with. But
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? All right, no other comments. I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment section. Action item 7A, approval of retail malt beverage and South Dakota farm wine, Rico's, 148 Main Street. Stacia.
Rico's, it will be reopening. She's hoping to, actually she wanted to reopen in April, but I don't know if she's actually opened.
lunch there today.
Lunch? Okay.
Carry out.
And she's had the license before. Everything came back great with her background check. Everything's in line with her sales tax license. So she is good, and I recommend it to be approved.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion, Alderman Peterson, second Alderman Jarvis. Any conversation? Roll call vote, please.
Bill Miner,
Yes.
John Johnson,
Yep.
Steve Jarvis,
Yes.
Jim Peterson.
Yes.
All in favor, motion approved. Action item 7B, approval of Boys and Girls Club lease. Brett?
So, last fall, we put the Boys and Girls Club on notice that we wanted to amend the existing agreement with them. And that agreement stated that we had to give them notice prior to a date in November so that we wanted to do so, and that it automatically renewed every year. So a few meetings back, we had that specific discussion about what elements, I think there was about 5 or 6 or 7 elements that I asked you as a council of what direction you wanted to go, and that was the term of the lease, the cost, what was the physical space that you wanted to lease out, all of those, and I think you guys kind of remember those. I'm not going to go through all of them. But the gist of it is that you were comfortable with extending the lease out through the end of this year, and there was consensus on the physical space and that we would continue to remove snow, things of that nature. So I had the elements that I needed to move forward on it. What I did was I incorporated into some other agreements that we had previously worked on, and that includes like liability language, insurance language, just an update to make sure that the city is covered. And unfortunately with legal documents, you go from like a 4-page document to now like a 14-page document. And that's just kind of the way life is today in today's world. So this was actually the draft copy we put into place after that conversation we had with council. Obviously, all of these bullet points with insurance, we had previously discussed those, and it's a part of the chamber agreement. So those elements were in place, so it was a matter of putting it together. I did share this with Talbot. He did not draft any of this, but he reviewed it and he said it looked great. Now, the one point that we do need to talk about that is a change from our previous discussions is it appears that there is a reason why the agreement was written the way it was as a renewing document that automatically renewed. Talbot brought this to my attention. I'll just read it real quick. It's in South Dakota Codified Law. It's 9-12-5.2. And if the governing body decides to lease any municipally owned property to any private person for a term exceeding 120 days and for an amount exceeding $500 annual value, it shall adopt a resolution of intent to enter into such lease and fix a time and a place for a public hearing on the adoption of the resolution. Notice of the hearing shall be published in the paper at least once 10 days prior to the hearing. Following the hearing, the governing body may proceed to authorize the lease upon the terms and condition it determines. So again, this is a good rule from the state, I think, of saying, we don't want anybody getting a buddy-buddy deal, essentially, oh, here you get this great deal, and it's getting pushed through, and that the community doesn't know or have any say in it. There's not some accountability for it, I guess, politically and financially, that, our buildings have value, and I think this is trying to address that. And so there was a conversation with Talbot about that, and I'll let him jump in here in a minute, that, this is an ongoing lease, and the thought is that if we keep it a renewing lease, automatically renewing, we won't have to trigger that publication in the paper and the resolution and the special hearing date and conducting a hearing every single year that this goes on. And so there is a need for an accountability, but we're going to add a lot more staff and legal, potentially legal work if we have to go to a hearing every year and a publication. I don't know what publication would cost. Daisha could better answer that, but it seems a lot more work and you would have to do it even if there wasn't any changes to it, if you only make the agreement valid for 1 year. So I think the document in front of you is a nice and fine document, but I would amend what's written in there to reflect kind of what the old language was, with that it automatically renewed, and it does automatically renew, and we still keep a deadline date to put them on notice. That seems to serve a purpose in the agreement above and beyond just looking at it at face value. And so I'd asked Talbot to speak on that, and you had brought up, Talbot, some case law or something that, because there was a question about the value of the lease of the $500 annually, and you can better explain that.
Sure. So, two things. First, the version in front of you was primarily drafted by staff and presented to me. I did, which is not in the version in front of you, present some edits mostly clarifying edits and an edit or suggestion edit back to staff, kind of depending on how the council wants to go with whether you want to go forward with designing this for meetings, that prevent the need for meetings on an annual basis. Because if you go with it's a year-to-year lease without the renewal, you're going to have to follow the statute cited by Brett. The question Brett had come back with that he's referencing was this issue of $500, because the comment that he made back to me was under the statute it says $500, well, we're only charging, this nominal amount. So why does the statute come into place? Well, the thing that I point out to Brett is it says for an amount exceeding $500 annual value, it shall adopt a resolution. And so the difficulty you have is the way the court looks at that is you can't avoid allowing somebody to use a piece of property that's worth significantly more than $500 just by sending the lease below it, because they say the value of that was more than $500 for them to have that annual lease. So the court would generally say, look, you've got to have that public meeting, not necessarily so that it has to be to the highest bidder, but it's so everybody can come in and say, okay, we don't think that's right that you're giving a lease to the Boys and Girls Club for $1 because it's worth more than that. But the city still has the discretion to say, no, we're still going to do that because of the relationship issue and what they do and provide the services they provide to the community. The court's going to okay that. What the court frowns upon is if you use that same logic, you could say, oh, I'm going to lease it to my buddy for $1, and I don't have to have notice a meeting then for the lease. So that's why you jump through that notice provision is to make sure that there's a reason and a purpose that the value of $500 of that lease is properly being let. So that's my opinion of why you need, if you're going to do this on an annual new lease every year, that you would have to go through that notice provision. The edits I had recommended to Brett to try to take it out of that would be that this would just be a rewrite of the existing lease, which was a renewal lease, and you could certainly just revise the existing lease so you wouldn't have to go through the public notice. But if you're going to go in a situation where essentially it becomes a new lease every year, you're going to have to do this every year. You're going to have to you'd have to notice the renewal every year.
So, Talbot, is it a trigger situation with the annual? And so if it was a 5-year lease and it was under $500, it's just every time you renew it, it would have to be noticed. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. So the difference I'd say is you don't think of it as what you're actually charging. Think of it, is it worth $500? I mean, if somebody is independent, looked at it, having this ground, is that worth $500? Well, yeah, it probably has that much of a value to the tenant, that much value. So what you can do a 5-year lease or you can do a multiple-year lease, and so you wouldn't have to notice it every year. But the original version as it was coming back was this was going to be a brand new lease, and if this is a brand new lease and you're terminating the old one, you're going to have to notice it. So if the desire is to simply tighten up the terms, you could certainly make some edits to the proposed lease agreement to make it clear that this is generally just a rewrite of the existing agreement. And there was that my conversation with Brett there was some language as to term on this that I thought potentially could also raise this issue as to renewals. Because the language, if you look at, let me just a second, I'm click back to something here. Yeah, so the concern I had is under section 3, where you say the term of this lease shall be for 2020 calendar year commencing on the first day, and any extension shall be subject to renegotiation, rental amount, other provisions of this agreement. That's not an automatic extension. That causes me some concern that without having an automatic extension, you would be stuck in a situation where, well, we're renegotiating rental amount and other provisions of the agreements. Somebody's going to start saying, well, that's really a new agreement. So I did have a couple of suggestions back to Brett that I thought there was better if the intent was to clean up the agreement and continue this relationship with automatic renewals, is to provide a little bit more clarifying language in that section, but yet leave in a short termination time period. So why they could certainly renew, or you could even get in the situation where it annually renews. If there's ever an issue, you would have a tight time frame where you could terminate the lease.
So Talbot, on a automatic renewal, that does not trigger for it to be published in the newspapers and all, is that what you're saying?
If the original lease agreement provides for an automatic renewal unless somebody cancels it, then that would not trigger it. But if you were saying you have a 1-year lease, but we can extend it if we negotiate a new lease, well, then I think you're getting to the point where you start saying, well, you're not really renewing it as you are drafting a new lease every year.
So if we drafted a new lease this year, new terms, and had the auto renew, it would be a notice this year, and then you wouldn't have to notice each year thereafter?
As long as the lease that you did the notice for provides for an auto renew short of somebody terminating. So what this document currently requires, and I'm trying to find that.
Yeah, it's a specific annual lease.
Right. Yeah. And then, I'm sorry.
My only concern
If you look at
is,
that,
my only concern is if we don't, if we make it a 2-year lease, my concern is that the public don't know that it's being renewed, and maybe some people want to speak out and come to the meeting about the lease.
yeah, and that's a good point. Two points I'd make on it is under that term section, in the one you guys even have in front of you, there's a termination under that section 3 for a 90-day notice termination. So even if somebody annually renews, you could still, if they're misbehaving, terminate that. But the other question is more of a policy question, and that is, how long do we want this lease to go forward with before we want to have a full hearing in front of the public, even if we're comfortable with them renewing it for another 5 years, whether it's 5 years, 2 years, whether it's, we can just annually renew it. If we ever have an issue, we can get them out in we can terminate with 90 days notice. That's a policy decision of what, how often you want to come in front. And cities do this different ways. Some will do it so it's a 5-year lease and they go through the renewal process every 5th year. Some will do it where it's kind of this more perennial deal, subject to termination if something gets out of line. Or the other thing it gives you with this early termination is, it could be a new board gets on you. So there's a whole different set of people sitting in your chairs 2 years from now, and they're like, we just don't think we're getting the bang for the buck, so we're going to terminate this and renegotiate or relet it. So there's that out, rather than entering the 5-year agreement. So those are all policy decisions. My concern is, I think in looking back at the original version of the lease, there was a need to kind of get the lease written in probably a better form. This goes a long ways to do that. Like I said, I've suggested a couple additional edits. The issue I raised on this renewal was, hey, if this is essentially a new lease, I think you have to follow the statute. And then the question is, if you're actually saying in your lease, that's basically a lease for 2020, but it can be extended, you run the risk of saying, well, yeah, but you should really notice every extension because it's a 1-year lease, subject to further negotiations to extend. And I don't like getting in that situation. Somebody could certainly argue, well, the lease says we can extend it, but the way the language reads, I think somebody could just, argue, well, essentially it's saying you can negotiate a new lease, not that it's an auto extension. And I think you want to be in a situation where you make that policy decision to say, either we're going to let them extend based on the following criteria, or we're going to pick a term of years. We're going to do it for 5 years, and even if everything's working perfect, we're going to have them back in 5 years so all the citizens get another, can come in and complain or say what a great deal it is.
Well, a lot can happen. A lot can happen in 5 years. I mean, look at this COVID-19. Right now, with the ones we have leases with, they might need some help. They might need a couple months of forgiveness or cut it in half. I mean, I'm comfortable with a couple years, but I think 5 years is extending things too long. I think our contract with the chamber is 2 years. And it would be nice to have all these contracts ending on the same year, then that way the council could deal with them and get it over with.
So Talbert, whatever the term length is, you have the early termination, so no matter if something was not going right, you still have the 90-day clause that can be triggered at any time. Is that a correct statement?
Correct.
And then as far as extending language, if you're going to have an extension, don't you just mutually agreed upon by both parties?
Yeah, so the issue, and this is what I raised with Brett on this version, number 2, it's a full rewrite pretty much of the first one, which I think you can work around, but I had someone comfortable. It was my understanding that the council was thinking, well, we should really make these year to year so they're reviewed every year and the terms are subject to change. Well, at that point, I'm kind of like, well, it's, so if you read this, if you read that section 3 as it's currently written, the term of lease shall be for the 2020 calendar year, commencing on the first day, January 2020, and ending at midnight. Okay, so the term ends. Any extension shall be subject to renegotiation of rental amount and the provisions of the agreement. That says to me, essentially, you're renegotiating this agreement at the end. You're not truly extending it. It's a new agreement. Because you are absolute and it's going to change. Just the way the language, I'm not saying that was the intent. So this is where Brett and I got in this conversation on the noticing, where I said, well, I think you get a problem because I read this and go, to me it looks like it's a new lease every year, and you have to re-notice. And I think under your original lease where it talks about kind of this auto extension, I think that's a cleaner way to go under the auto extension with the short termination date. So if you have to terminate or you have to do something, you're not stuck with it. And then you avoid anybody coming in and arguing later, hey, that lease is invalid because it said it was good for 2020. And yeah, you essentially renegotiated, and the renegotiation really constitutes a new lease. And you should have held another public hearing.
So I get that part. So in that section 3, term of the lease shall be, and it defines the dates, any extension. So couldn't you just say in there, this lease auto renews upon mutual agreement by both parties?
Yeah, the language I recommended was to add a sentence after 2020 that just said the agreement shall automatically renew annually unless terminated by either party pursuant to this agreement. That the landlord can condition any renewal on renegotiation of the renter amount. So I think that then puts you in a stronger position if you want to have, this go year to year, and just be in place, to avoid that argument of the statute, that you have to notice it up. So it's not, and going back to the comment made earlier, to me, it's a policy decision. You could put this agreement automatically renews every year for 5 years, and then we'll make them come back. You can have it auto renew, and basically on a wide open, and you still have the short-term termination if it gets out of whack.
Well, what if we put in there, the public will be notified 60 days before this auto renews, so they can come and if they have any objections or comments about it.
Well,
Yeah, I'm sorry,
Talbot. Wouldn't,
jump over my.
yeah, I apologize. Wouldn't that be, notice in an agenda item that it's going to auto renew, and that would be public notice?
Yeah, there's a difference there. So the statute requires it to be a public hearing, which you'd have to publicize notice for, specifically that you're having a public hearing, just like if you're doing a liquor license. So if the existing lease is just a rewrite renewal of the old one, I think you have the provision, you're getting some public notice of the meeting, but it isn't a public hearing. It isn't noticed as a public hearing. So while it's on your agenda, that does not constitute a public hearing unless you do the publication of the actual hearing notice.
But if we're auto renewing and just stating that this lease is auto renewing, the auto renewing part is what gets us out of the full out public notice and hearing?
So if the concern I have with the term that in the version in front of you is somebody can make a pretty good argument, that's a 1-year lease.
I agree.
So my recommendation, if the intent is just auto renew it unless there's an issue, well, the 90 days, if there's an issue, gives you a pretty good out, and then just auto renew it. And the comment brought up earlier, well, what if we did it on a term of years? That would work too. If you wanted, again, that's not really a legal decision. You can do it either way legally. If you wanted to go for a period of time, that's more of a policy decision. Does the board think that you want to make sure that you hold a formal public hearing at least once every 5 years? Well, then you say you can auto renew up to 4 more years, and then you have to come back for a public hearing. You could add that in there if you want to make sure that the actual notice public hearing, to the point of, you could also put in this to say if it's auto renewed, it has to appear on the agenda. The way to do it is, Boys and Girls Club has to send a letter to the mayor. The mayor has to put it on the calendar just so it's acknowledged as information. So you at least then you would have it in on every meeting annually that it's going on. So then if anybody did have an issue with it, they could come to that meeting at least and say, hey, we think you guys should terminate this because X, Y, and Z. So you could do it that way if that, so at least every year it'd be on one of your agendas, even if it wasn't a formal public meeting, a public hearing, excuse me.
The only thing difference is you're not getting it in the paper and all that, and then these guys aren't going through the whole hearing thing and it auto renews.
I just feel like the public should be made aware so they can voice their opinion on some of these leases. That's just me, because it's, some of these leases can get out of whack, and I think the public needs to be a little bit more aware.
I thought there's some talk that we were gonna actually charge them rent besides $1 a year.
No, the consensus was not to charge them any rent.
No, I don't think so.
That was the consensus out of that meeting. It was specifically discussed.
I didn't, I'd like to see the tape. I mean, I don't think I said that.
If you want to change that, that's up to you. You have an opportunity to do it now. This document reflects the discussion that occurred back then.
Can that be changed anytime, the payment rent part? It's just a
At the
short
front end
line.
of the, at the front end.
Yeah,
of the
you want to
lease.
change it now before it goes into effect.
I know that.
Yeah.
So if it auto renews and we get past the hearing thing and subject to however Talbert said it, that both parties agree, then it just auto renews. If someone has a problem, then they're renegotiating, and then you probably have to do the whole noticing thing, in a formal level, noticing, and have a hearing. That would be my understanding of what we just went through.
So Talbot, I have a question. I want to tie into Alderman Peterson's comment about automatic renewal with mutual consent, right? Is that boiled down
I
to what
think
you were
he
saying?
said it, he just said it a different way.
Yeah, so it's automatic renewal with mutual consent. I'm having a hard time, if you have mutual consent, like you're actively voting on it, that you're agreeing to it, then it's not automatic. Does that make sense?
The original document auto renews if there's not a descent.
Yeah, that's
then
what I'm getting at, is
you're-
I don't think we
you're-
want to, I don't think we want to proactively approve it annually to renew, because you're taking action on it. It would only be if there was a problem, then you would bring it, and engage
So it
this
could go on for-
termination.
if it was an annual
Or
deal.
the renegotiation, that way you
So it
don't
could
have
go
to
3
take.
years and then there was a problem.
Yeah,
and
you don't
then-
have to take any action, it
Mhm.
will renew unless there is dissent and you want to renegotiate or, modify it, that there's no
So the
active.
mutual consent.
There's no active vote.
The
on
mutual,
it.
no, but the mutual consent is, we still agree with this lease.
Right, I think it's just in the wording.
Yeah.
We don't want to actually take a vote every year, is my point. That it automatically renews unless there is a desire to amend
How
the
about
agreement.
continued consent? I mean, Talbert said it in another way.
Yeah. I think we all know what we mean, and Talbot would be the one, I've got his notes. I didn't make the changes in the document because I wanted you to see the document that you had come up with consensus as far as termination dates, years, annual.
But he's adding that auto renew segment.
Right, yeah. And I've got that language. Again, I didn't put it in here because I wanted to reflect what your guys' comments were from that meeting. And then have the opportunity to bring this piece of it to you tonight, see where you want to go with it.
I think where we went the last time was that you were going to make the draft up and we were going to look at it before we voted on it. I thought that was kind of what we discussed, because you said something about this draft here. And so I'm not so sure if a dollar amount was discussed then.
Finalized.
Right.
Yeah, that's fine. If you want to have another discussion about that, that's fine. This is the perfect opportunity. Again, with action items, you don't have to approve this tonight. Between the conversation with the automatic renewal, and if you want to bring up the cost, the lease amount question, this is the perfect time to have that discussion. We can continue action on this until the next meeting. We have all those options ahead of us.
Yeah, why not
So-
talk about it now? If we're on the dollar, do we get what Talbert's issue was there? On the renewal deal? So what, price-wise, what's your,
that's-
recommendation, I
That's
guess?
a nice building down there. I was thinking 500 a month. That's 6,000 a year. That's a whole lot less than what you can get a building that size for, I think, any place. Thoughts?
What's the chamber's rent? Offhand?
It's 11,000 a year.
And they got whole lot smaller building.
Who pay, the chamber pays all the utilities at their, yeah, and who, the Boys and Girls Club pays all their utilities, right? Yeah. And outdoor maintenance is done by the city on both buildings, correct?
Correct.
Indoor maintenance is minor on, for both, and then anything sort of significant, water heater goes out or something, that'd be on the city, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Now, has the city, have they done extra work on the inside as far as maintenance and all that maybe the Boys and Girls Club should have done? In the same way with the chamber, I'll ask
You know, our biggest cost exposure for that Boys and Girls Club building that gives us fits on a regular basis is the heating system, the boiler.
Which is, you maintain as a landlord anyway.
Yeah, and so that is an issue of ours, you know, to make sure that that boiler works. It just, I don't know if it's a control module. We've had, you know, the right people looking at it, trying to adjust it and fix it and replace parts and whatnot. Beyond that, we've assisted with the Boys and Girls Club with replacement of like light bulbs on that big ceiling. We've taken our lift in there and helped them do that kind of stuff. Technically, light bulb replacement falls within what they should be doing, but they don't have equipment like that to get a lift all the way up into the ceiling. If there's
Who provided
different,
the light bulbs?
pardon me,
Who provided the light bulbs?
that I can't answer. I'd have to look at that. I'm not sure. I believe, I don't know that we have a stock of them. I believe the Boys and Girls Club does, but I might be mistaken. I'm not
Brett?
sure. Yeah.
Brett, this is Robin, can I speak?
So Robin, can we finish the conversation at the council level and then I'll go ahead and open it up to you? Okay?
Yes,
Thank you.
that'll work, thank you.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, as far as things that they haven't done, I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, there's been cases where maybe a faucet's not working right. I know that they've called their own plumber to work on it. I know, you know, most everything we're asking them to take care of is the items that they use on a regular basis that they can wear out. You know, the locks of the building, the outlets, the switches. You know, if there's a wiring problem, it's going to be on the city. If it's a sewer line issue that's in the walls or whatever, that's going to be on the city. I know that they've had a plumber in there working on other miscellaneous things. You know, we're not going to strip the floors and re-wax them. They're taking care of that kind of stuff. So I believe they're doing what they need to be doing to keep themselves operational. And again, we do the major, they do the minor.
So I'd also like the council to consider what the function is of the different places that we're talking about. So the chamber, their function is very different than what the Boys and Girls Club does. The people who utilize the organizations are two different groups as well. So you're really kind of talking about apples and oranges when you take a look at that. So any other council discussion right now? If not, I'd like to go ahead and open it up to Robin, who's representing the Boys and Girls Club.
Or did we ever come up with a dollar amount?
Yeah, so I'd like to finish this conversation on price.
Yeah.
Bill,
Okay.
do you have a comment on price? Because that's what we're talking about right now.
Bill?
Take yourself off mute.
Just had to unmute.
There you go.
I have no particular thoughts on the cost, so what Steve is saying sounds reasonable, I guess.
John?
I think it should be more than $1 a year. Like I said, Christ, I've heard it forever, especially from the older people in town that, you know, so much of their tax money goes to the youth between the school and the Boys and Girls Club.
And you know, maybe they'll have to make some adjustments with some, you know, maybe with some positions on. You know, that's maybe not needed.
I wouldn't think $500 a month would be unreasonable for the size of the building. Be a hell of a lot more than $1, but
When would you implement that? Because they're, you know, in a budget cycle.
I would propose to not have it to start this year, but start in January 2021. Then that way the city can work it into their budget to receive those funds, and the Boys and Girls Club to put it in their budget to pay those funds out.
So if you go that direction, would you be interested in doing sort of an escalation clause? And so that if you started that next year, maybe it's $200 a month, you know, so they can ease into, you know, whatever, because they're,
I
you
think,
know,
I
and
think
then-
giving them from now until first of the year is plenty of time.
Plenty of time?
That they can adjust positions if they need to, maybe some salaries. You know, I personally, I don't know if, why this one doesn't run on its own. You know, I mean, as far as, and if they want to get ideas from the other boys and girls clubs, maybe they can have a conference call, you know, once every 2 weeks, a month or something like that.
Well, this is tied in to two other boys and girls
That's
clubs,
what I
right?
know.
Yeah,
Yes.
and do we know if they had leases with them and what the costs with them are? Robin probably can answer that. So I
mean, my proposal is 500 a month, not starting until 2021. Then that way it gives their all concerned time to start paying it out, you know, adjust, yeah.
So just FYI, I pulled up the minutes from that discussion. So this is the narrative from that discussion for that meeting. I don't know if you can read it. If I expand it anymore, it kind of goes off the page.
But will be revisited at budget time.
Right.
So,
Well,
I
now
mean, it
it's
doesn't mean, you know, I mean, still that.
now it's good as time as ever to
Yeah.
revisit it.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't preclude us from
That's right.
revisiting it right now. Okay, I don't have any other ideas or comments.
I mean, if someone thinks we need to adjust each month, that's fine. I would love to hear it, but I don't think 500 a month is bad at all for that building.
What are the other two, Lead and what, Hot Springs?
Mm-hmm. And I'm not.
So can we, you want to hear from Robin so she can fill in your gaps?
Sure.
Okay, so Robin, you want to go ahead and address the council?
Yeah, are you there?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, this is Robin. I am the Resource Development Director for the Boys and Girls Club of the Black Hills. First thing is I want to thank you, Kathy, for the announcement you did a little while ago. I appreciate that, and I know all the families in Hill City that use the Boys and Girls Club, and appreciate that too, that we are different than what the Hill City Chamber is and what they provide, what we provide. We run on grants and any donations that come in. Hot Springs and Lee Deadwood. Hot Springs is a donated building, no rent. All we have to do is pay the utilities, that kind of thing. As is the same for the Hanley Center in Leeds. So I know for many years it's been done the way it's been done to, you know, and Brett can tell you, you know, it's been $1 a month for, I can't tell you how long, because I've only been with them for a little over 13 months now. You have to think about the families that support the clubs. And what we have even done with the COVID-19 thing, and we're not only serving families and children, any senior can come into our building for the last month and pick up boxes of food that are brought in because we're a distributor for Feeding South Dakota. We've had people come in that are seniors to pick up those boxes when I've been there. I've taken those boxes out to those cars for those people because they can't physically come and get them, or because of the COVID-19 problem. As to what Brett was talking about with the heating system, yeah, there's just always been just a little thing that's been wrong with it, but we've always been able to deal with it and make it work with a little bit of assistance from Public Works. Yes, Brett, we do use the lift to do those lights in the gym, but we provide the light bulbs for the whole building. And because I know when we had help with that, I went and got the light bulbs out of the boys' room. We have a section in the boys' bathroom that hold those different supplies that we use for all of the building. Okay. The other thing is we have a janitorial couple that come in, and she cleans nightly from about 6:30 to 9 o'clock every night when we are in our normal situation. With COVID-19, she's been working about 6 hours a day, 4 days a week, cleaning. So it's always been a janitorial, we've always had a janitorial system going through. Hot Springs, because of the situation down there, they have a janitorial system, but it's one of the employees that does it as a side job for them, from what I understand. I'm not sure what to even say about the $500 a month. I know it will put a hardship at a point because we are donors and grants. And I can't tell you how many grants in the last month and a half that I've been writing to and waiting for answers to find out how we're going to get through this COVID-19 situation. We want the kids to come back. We want everything to be back the way it used to be over 4 weeks ago, as does everybody else. I just hope that we will be able to work as we always have together to keep this going in the community, because for the 60, 70 kids that we have come in almost nightly and go through the center and have a place to go until mom and dad come home from work at 5:30, 6 o'clock from Rapid or Custer or Keystone. You know, I hope we can still work together and make this work for them, because it is all about the kids and the family in the community and the families in the community. Any questions?
Yeah, Robin, I'm sorry, you talked about Hot Springs that facility was a no charge, similar to what we've been doing. I didn't quite hear the lead facility. What was that? I'm sorry.
Okay. The lead one is also it's a building that is not leased. It is for the use of the Boys and Girls Club. Plus the Hanley Center has its health unit with it, you know, where they have exercise units and, you know, kind of like what we've got over at the high school.
So it's more of
Kind
a
of a
community.
situation.
It's more of a community facility.
Yes,
And there's no
But it's not
there's no
leased.
lease to the Boys and Girls Club.
right. Because it's providing a service. Because it's right across. It's kitty corner and right across from the school, in the same kind of a situation that, you know, for those families that, you know, everybody has a problem with daycare. I can remember having a problem with daycare. My kids went to the boys club, or the club for boys in Rapid as it is now, and Girls Inc. I've got nephews that have gone to those clubs. I've got neighbors that are still going to that club from where I grew up in Rapid. And it's a service that's needed, whether you're a single parent, you are grandparents raising your grandkids, or families that just don't make enough and not having enough daycare in your area. It's a whole different situation when you have to go out there and look for daycare and you have the Boys and Girls Club.
Robin, this is
And like
Steve.
I said, yes, go ahead.
I have a question. Why is it, why should you be associated with LEAD and Hot Springs? What benefits does that give you?
All that does is we're all three independent, okay? Any money that comes into Hill City goes to Hill City. It does not go to the Hot Springs Club. It does not go to the LEAD Club. My wage for my position comes out of all three clubs because of the position that I hold as the Resource Development Director. I work like 13.4 some hours plus per club that I'm required each week. And then the rest of the time I work on, all my paperwork and stuff that will be sufficient for all three clubs. That's the same way with, I believe that's how it is with the director. Now y'all know Ronnie, Veronica, she is at this specific club and this is where she works. Okay? Now on occasion, she may need to go to LEAD or to Hot Springs, but she has the background to teach something that is needed in some sort of a workshop or seminar that then she has that opportunity to go do that for any of the new employees that come into those other two areas. Did that help?
It did to a certain point, I guess.
Okay.
And you have a director that's over all three, correct?
Yes. But we also
Why do
have,
we need a director over all three? Why can't you three resource directors get together on a phone call once a month, once every 2 weeks? Why do we need a director just being over all three?
okay. There's actually one resource director, and that's me. We have one director, and that happens to be Lisa. Each unit has a program director, a team coordinator, a youth development specialist, and that's because those are what is required for the clubs coming through BGCA. Okay? And if there's an opportunity, I know there is buzz for possibly maybe a fourth one coming out of Somerset. So that doesn't mean that's going to happen, but they need something there because they're in the same situation where they don't have enough daycare there and there's kids without a place to go. So somebody needs to come up with a plan for Somerset, South Dakota. And it just happens to be, it's a possibility, but it's not in the works. So that's just a thought right there. It just happens to be that there's one CEO, there's one RD, and each club has a certain amount of employees that cover the ages of the children, because you can only have so many kids per adult, and you have to be able to provide different educational activities, after school program, nutritional things like that throughout the day, every day. We are run with a kind of like a board for the city. We have 6 people that are board members. We have a president and a vice chair, a secretary treasurer, that kind of a situation, just like a city does. But the whole board manages all 3 clubs also.
Robin, so the 2 of you that oversee 3 facilities, is that reflected in your wages then? They contribute, each of one of the facilities sort of contributes to your wages? That's probably how that goes. So wouldn't that, I guess,
Yeah.
to me, that would be like efficiency, kind of. To have,
It could be.
well, I mean, to have
Yeah.
one director over all three, I don't know,
I just look at the upper management, and is it all needed?
Isn't
Oh, I
it?
don't, well, let's put it, in order to keep the grants and donations coming in, you have to have one person that can work on it. And the one person happens to be this position. And I will tell you, I make less than the teacher does. Because I used to be a teacher, and I made more then than I do now, and I work my butt off.
What about
And that is the
what
same
about the
for-
position ahead, above you, though? I mean,
Okay, and it's the same situation. She's supposed to be, she was in Hill City yesterday, she was in Hill City on Friday, and she was in Hill City on Wednesday. Then on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, she was either in Hot Springs or the Deadwood. Because of this COVID-19 thing, she's always coming in with supplies of donations with those backpacks, those grab-and-go activity packs, because those kids want those things. I mean, you'd be amazed because you'd think that they have enough homework and stuff that's coming home, you know, from their online classes with their teachers, but the parents are needing the activities because they're home with those kids. And so we've got parents that can't wait to walk in the door to get the next science project or the next art craft project that is going out each week, as we're running right now because of COVID-19. And that's just how it is. But then you go and put an RD director in each club that's 2 more plus wages to what they have with just me for all 3. And that would be the same, I would probably guess that's what it is with the CEO.
thanks for the explanation.
Okay, I hope I got it as best as I can, and I know Lisa was up in Leeds yesterday. Well, no, she was in Hill City yesterday, and I believe Leeds today. It was her plan to be here instead of me, but I'm here, and I volunteer because it's close to my heart, even though the situation that we're in right now with COVID-19, it's really hard.
and that's the reason why I would like to see the leases not stretched out like for 5 years or something like that, because you know, we can get in there and do something like if it was really hard on you guys, we could get in there and do some adjustments.
Okay, any other
Thanks,
questions?
Dave.
Any other questions for Lisa? Or any
Robin?
other questions for Robin? Sorry, Robin. Nothing else for
All
Robin.
right.
Any other council conversation? Council, would you like to recognize someone in the audience?
Yes.
Thank you, Robin.
Would you please come up
Thank
to
you,
the...
Robin.
You're welcome.
Vic Alexander, I think there's probably only one of us that has enough history to know the beginning of the whole Boys and Girls Club thing in Hill City, John. So that goes back to the youth center, and I don't know how many people remember that, the youth center, but the Boys and Girls Club is an offshoot of the youth center, which was a nonprofit years ago. Don't know how long you've been here, Brett, but you know the history of the Boys and Girls Club in Hill City. Actually, that was a process. The building was built for free for Hill City from the National Guard. It was the front part of the buildings was 2 governor's houses that were also provided by Governor Janko to be put and built together with that National Guard building. So the building was free to the city of Hill City to begin with. A question on the senior citizens, that's the same type of a lease. isn't it?
So Victor, I'd like to keep the conversation to the Boys and Girls Club right now.
But I'm just asking about, because we're talking about the lease, right?
But we're talking about the
And we're
lease for
talking
the
about-
Boys and Girls Club. We've already been on this topic for at least 40
Okay,
minutes.
but you gotta ask somebody that's been here that knows, because obviously nobody's stepping forward
So-
to indicate what the history is, so that you know where you're going forward.
Right.
If the senior citizen center was built, the senior citizen center rent is what?
Victor, we're
And the
talking,
reason
but we're
agreed-
not discussing the senior citizen center right
Okay,
now.
we did to begin with, a few minutes ago, we discussed how the, what was it? Steve,
Chamber.
at the very beginning, huh?
Chamber.
Discussed
The chamber, yeah, we
rent.
discussed the chamber, the same
Senior
thing, the
citizen center rent
senior
is $1, so.
Is what?
It's $1.
That's what I wanted to point out, it was $1 because it is, this is just like the same thing
Okay,
for the Boys and Girls Club at Hill City, for the youth and the younger people in Hill City, as the senior citizen thing is for the senior citizens.
okay,
And I think it's a service for the community. I
okay,
don't necessarily disagree with you. I do agree that it's a fantastic building, Steve. And I think that I like small government, I like efficient government, I don't like wasting money. But I can tell you that the Boys and Girls Club is serving a pretty good service in Hill City.
okay.
And I don't think that it needs to be labored that much. I mean, the amount that they're at $500 wouldn't kill the process because there are people that are gonna step up. But I think it's the same thing going on at the Boys and Girls Club that's going on at the Senior Citizen Center. The Senior Citizen Center was also not built by the city. But it ends up being that way because the building was provided. It is owned by the city. It was on city ground, as the Boys and Girls Club is. But I just was trying to interject some
Okay.
history that we could
Perfect, thank you, sir.
use.
Okay, so what we have on the table tonight is you've got the background relative to the legal information that has been provided to us. What's on the table right now that you have is the draft of the lease that was rewritten based on our last conversation. We have the ability to approve that lease, which based on the conversation we have, sounds like the council has some different ideas. What is the council's choice and how we move forward with this? We can approve it, we can table it, we can request the modifications to be made, and it can be tabled to be brought back at a later time. It can be tabled and we can continue with how it is today, and then it can be brought up again at budget time, as was the conversation before. And we can continue with the Reds as it is for the rest of this year. What's the council preference?
Well, I'd like to see the term thing in writing, how Talbert's gonna write that up. So they don't have to have a formal hearing each year. I don't think that's necessary.
I do think the public needs to be able to speak on it. If they have something to say about it, rather than just automatically renewing every year. I mean, if we're gonna do it for 5 years, at least let the public have some say. I mean, it's all about transparency. That's all I've heard about. And I think it'd be transparent to let the public know that the lease is coming up to be automatically renewed. And if they have something to say about it, they should be able to come to the meeting and say.
Okay.
Through an agendized meeting.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a formal hearing.
No,
And
just,
I don't know why we have to go to a 5-year lease, just, it renews, it's a year-to-year,
well, I think we need to set a year.
I mean,
a certain number of years.
But if you set, I guess my opinion is if you set it as a annual, or this lease, and it auto renews, takes care of it.
But then Talbot say you could do it for 5 years, and there wouldn't have to be an actual discussion till the 5th year, you know what he said?
Well, that's true. I mean, if you wanted to say every 5 years, you have to kind of go through that process, and it's, saying this is what you're gonna do. And
But I think on a yearly basis, it should be on the agenda for the public to be able to speak.
But it would be.
I think the council members at that time would
Yep.
love to hear from not only this one, but other ones too.
Yeah, I don't have any issue with that. I mean, that it just gets agendized, that it's renewing.
Right.
And then people that are,
And let them come and speak.
because if they have an opinion on it, they're gonna be told that it comes on the agenda. But I don't know that we necessarily need to set a 5-year or whatever. It just automatically keeps going until there's an issue.
I think it needs to come to a head where it is discussed every so often.
So-
I mean, that's been a problem with this one the whole time. It's just
I
been
see.
kind of been, it just keeps on and on and on. And
It just gets rubber stamped, in your opinion?
and it just keeps going.
So, okay, I'll throw it out there. Every 3 years, it has a formal review process. it renews, auto-renews, and that means then the city will have to do its noticing in a formal and have a formal hearing.
But every year, the people get to come and speak out if they don't want
But it would
something.
be agendized every
Sure.
year that it's auto-renewing.
Sure.
And that kind of thing, so.
I mean, it
I
could
don't
be
have
5
any
years.
issue.
I'm not against 5 years. It don't have to be 3, it could be 5.
Okay.
I just think there needs to be a point where the council has to sit down and
'Cause they
really
have-
take a serious look at it.
So they have the 90-day thing in here. You know, so if there was a major problem, it would be addressed.
But again, it's like you said, it's been rubber stamped in the
Okay.
before. And I think there needs to be that stopping point where it is, where everyone takes a look at it.
So you wanna, did I make a motion?
No, there
Started.
hasn't been any
You
motion.
started.
Started.
I didn't finish.
Nope.
No.
Okay. I'll go, then I will go with, make a motion to adjust the term section under 3 to reflect something of this nature, that it's a formal review every 5 years and it auto-renews with the language we discussed, I think we hammered out, and that, you know,
Within that 5 years, it automatically renews.
every year.
Yep.
It's renewing each year, and that, you know, with that renewal, it'll be agendized and say, hey, this, you know, so people, if they have any kind of beef or opinion or suggestion or something positive maybe, they can show up. So let's see, how do I
Yeah.
condense that in a motion then, right? Every 5 years.
Can you throw Lisa out in there?
I think you guys get it, right? And
Lease
it
amount, no
auto-renews, and
change.
whatever that language that makes both parties have to, you know, agree essentially.
What
on-
about lease amount?
No change this year and change starting 2021?
Yeah, but for what dollar amount are we talking about? We're talking about 500.
So I just did the
Okay.
term thing.
And I would say $500 a month starting in 2021.
So would you like to amend your motion to include $500 a month starting 2021?
I can't go there.
Well,
I'm sorry.
Okay, so let's just take that part of it. Can I have a second?
You know, and the reason I can't go there, because I know that there's a need for childcare, and the private sector hasn't been able to step up.
So
and
are
provide-
you saying still $1 a year?
I just, I don't think the city benefits for $6,000 a year to the detriment that it would maybe put on to, I think, I know what, I sense your opinion is that organization run efficiently? That's a whole different discussion, and I don't think, I've looked into how can we provide more childcare into this town.
You know, I don't
And-
think we necessarily need to vote on it tonight.
Yeah.
I think we should have all that written in here, come back next meeting when it's all, written.
Well, I just wanted to address the term thing
Okay.
and get that, so I'm in favor of tabling this and get that in writing so we can see it. As far as the dollar amount, I struggle both ways with that. I get where, but I think the detriment to, because I know, when I had my office, those kids came whipping around my place, and I know it's a need, and and there's probably more of a need that needs to be for this community, but privately, it's not penciling out.
So are you going to amend that to table this pending the changes you just
Well, okay,
articulated?
I'm gonna skip I'm gonna,
Revise your motion?
no, I'm gonna take it back.
Okay,
It's not on the table anymore,
okay,
okay? I want that part of the term thing dealt with,
yep,
okay? So, I will just say, let's table it.
okay.
And then I'll make that motion, but if the dollar amount, I guess we can address that as we come back. I guess it doesn't need to be, because, that's a line item, that's change a number. It's $1 now, and it's, so if we have to, so I would like to see this language on the renewal thing, because not necessarily as cut as dry as saying 500 a month or $500 a month or $1 a year.
So we will revise the term so that it is a plug-in number. So you can put in 5 years, you can put in 3 years. We'll put in that language that it'll be as a discussion item on the agenda. And it can be like the first meeting in October every year, the first meeting September every year, something like that.
Well, would it be a discussion item or would it be an action item just out of?
That's up to you guys.
Yeah. Okay.
If you're taking action on it,
I
would think you could just do it in a discussion item, and then if something warrants investigation, it would give us time to investigate, then set it as an agenda item to get the research and whatnot before we do anything too drastic without knowledge in front of us.
And that also kicks it out a little ways,
Yep.
so that
Correct.
more people
I
can
think
hear
it
about it.
buys you more time
Yep.
of hearing the full discussion, because that information will hit the public, and it's like, oh, I want to participate in that discussion if it is an action item. But then we can also, like you said, the plug and play dollar amount, we'll write it so that we can adjust that number for the lease, that we can plug that number in at the next meeting, whether it's $500, $0, $50 a month per year, whatever. We'll try to make it scalable so that we can get everything down except for maybe those two numbers.
So we'll table this to an action item next meeting, pending those changes that we just discussed.
Mayor?
Yes, Alderman Minor, you have the floor.
Thank you. I just had a thought. First off, I wanted to thank Director Platson. I think she does a great job there. Second, I'm thinking ahead towards the budget in July. Last year I said the funding out of Triple B and the other things that we did are unsustainable. And so in light of what's happening in our country right now with COVID, I think our budgets for next year are going to be even tighter. And so we may be doing like a double whammy to the Boys and Girls Club, where we cut what monies we can contribute to them and charge them extra rent. And so I was just thinking about that maybe the way to leave this is at $1, and if the city is unable to sustain I believe it was a $20,000 contribution this year that we gave them, that we don't hit them twice, because I recognize the financial impact that it would have to their operations. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Minor. Okay, any other comments? Do I have a second to Alderman Peterson's motion?
Which is just to table it.
Which is just to table it, yep,
Second.
To the next meeting.
to the next meeting. Second, Alderman Jarvis. Any other conversation? Roll call vote, please, Stacia.
John Johnson.
Yes.
Steve Jarvis.
Yes.
Jim Peterson.
Yes.
Bill Minor.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carried. We
And
can,
cut him loose.
yep. So, Attorney Wyzorek, I think that's what we needed you for tonight, so you can be excused. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you,
All
Talbot.
right. Thank you. Everybody
Thank
be safe.
Thanks. Okay,
Thank
action.
you, Kathy. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you, Robin.
Okay, action item 7C, personal policy manual, adopting an authorization language for EIAB, leave during public health emergency. And I believe it's up to Stacia, with a little bit of help from Brett, potentially.
As most of you know, the federal government put some language in with the Department of Labor regarding the COVID-19. This sheet that's in there is what we gave out to our employees to instruct them regarding what the COVID-19 paid sick leave and family leave contains, and we dumbed it down as much as we could to give it to them. There's a lot of language. If you read through it, it's very hard to understand what it's actually pertaining to. So this starts April 1st for our employees. It runs through December 31st. It's for full-time employees and part-time employees, and this benefit. And this mainly pertains to if they actually get COVID-19, does it take effect? It's not like right now where no one is really affected by it. I think I have one employee that is actually using it right now. He has been told by the doctor to stay home, just from symptoms that he has. And in light of that, of taking that, we wanted to transfer something to our own personal policy manual, which is our EAB, which is our extended illness accrual bank, which is already a liability to the city if something happens regarding work comp, if someone gets terminally ill, anything like that. So we wanted to just extend it to allow them to use that in case of a health emergency. And we have kind of broken it down to that they can use it immediately. They can only use 120 hours of it. And they also, if some of our newer employees that don't have the accumulation hours built up, that they could borrow on this account, but they have to pay it back. And that includes if they decide to leave us early and they haven't paid it back, it will be deducted from the final paycheck. And we related it to kind of what the federal government has done and some of their requirements that we also have just laid out there for them. And we also gave access to have the mayor stating that yes, we could use it immediately if we needed to. Questions, or Brad, is there anything that I missed?
I think you covered everything. I just wanted to clarify. So this document, this is a federal government requirement of everybody in the country right now. So we have to give them access to this leave. We will be reimbursed at a later date for it. So this is one program that you don't have any control over. We're just administering it and letting you know what it looks like. You're not voting on this part of it.
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. I'm just filling in what I think will help clarify it. So the other one is exactly like Stacia said. We already have accrued EIAB leave. It's extended illness accrual bank. If you worked here 15 years, you're going to have 700 and some odd hours, 720 hours of leave. I've been here 13 years. I probably have 500 and some hours of it. That sits there, and it can only be accessed in a certain manner. And in this document that we presented to you, the first page of it, in the regular typeface, is what's already in that policy. What's in the italics and the bold is what we want to add, essentially for the future. If any other medical health issue hits our city, our county, our state, they're not going to be able to access this if there's a health crisis in Colorado. It's got to be affecting our locale, our operation. And so we put that limiting language in there. We don't want them to exhaust their whole balance with this. This is just another safety net, so to speak, to make sure that our employees can, stay home. The federal program only pays you for 2 weeks. What if you're sick for 3 weeks? This is kind of a stopgap of saying, look, we don't know how everybody will respond. There's somebody who, in the news media, contracted it. He's not showing any symptoms of the coronavirus, but his wife is positive as well, and she's having a horrible time with it. He's just fine. We don't know how people are going to react to it, but we wanted to put something into our system that could respond to future health, public health emergencies and open that up to say, hey, look, we're prepared now. We're ready for it. Because this isn't written specifically for COVID-19. This is, I think, just a good policy for us to go forward to available sick leave hours that somebody under the current rules wouldn't qualify for, but they've earned it over their tenure with the city. So.
Any questions?
Okay, so I have, in the event on F, that's the item you're adding. Yeah, in the event a public health emergency is declared by the United States of America, state of South Dakota, or Pennington County that directly impacts city employees, or the mayor authorized access to an EIAB, that's this bank, right? The following shall occur. The mayor authorized, and I would suggest putting in approved by the council.
I agree.
And employees may access EIB accrual immediately. So the way it's written now, some kind of impact such as this, you wouldn't be able to access your EIB right now.
With our current rules, we could not access our EIB with what's currently going on.
This came into effect as a...
Right, that's
this
the
is
federal
a-
government's
yeah,
solution
so-
to the
So
problem.
you couldn't
Yep.
access it based on what's going on right now.
With the current language,
With the current language,
we couldn't access
yeah.
it for coronavirus issues.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay. Employees may use up to 120 hours, okay?
Unless you were hospitalized, that's the difference.
Yeah.
So if you look at item C,
Right,
it can be
immediately.
immediately looked at in case of emergency hospitalization, surgery, or inpatient treatment.
So
So
they-
you could there.
Yeah, okay.
That would qualify then.
Mhm.
But you're talking about a significant health event again.
Employees may access EIB immediately. Employees may use up to 120 hours of EIB per public health emergency. They have to have so many hours in their bank anyway, right?
No, they can exhaust it, but we are trying to not have them exhaust it in case something else happens. Say we have them here too, we want to make sure when they come back to work from this, that if they get hurt on the job, they can use this for their work comp portion of it. It falls into place with that and works with that. So we don't want to exhaust all of it because they might need it for some other crisis or
Employee-
some other health issue that they might have.
Okay, thank you. Employees, including employees on probation with EIB balances below, may borrow and utilize up to 40 hours of paid leave from the city. So you would grant them 40 hours, and the borrow hours may be paid back how do they pay back?
They accumulate every paycheck. We already accumulate the 1.85 hours per paycheck.
So then they would
They
pay
would have
that
to pay it
back.
back,
And
yes,
if
which
they were
would-
at zero, they'd have to pay the 40 back and then start building up from there
Right. And it
But-
takes about a year to
to
for
get
them.
40.
Yep.
To get 40.
But would they have to pay it back before they were allowed any more?
Yeah.
hours.
Once they've exhausted that 40 hours, they don't get anything more until we.
Until it's paid back.
Yep, till it's all
Okay.
paid back.
Well, wait a minute. Employees may use up to 120 hours of EIB per emergency.
That's
Do they have to have that in their bank to utilize it? So you're only adding a potential of another 40
if
if they were down to zero. Just
Right.
just
Yep.
playing it out.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not adding a 40, let's say I have 500 hours in my
Right.
account.
You'd have to
We're not
exhaust
giving
it to
me
zero.
another
and
40
then-
hours.
And then be eligible for the 40.
Yeah, it's only for the brand new employees that haven't been here for very long that might only have accrued, maybe they have 5 hours, maybe they have
Just
7 hours.
However, they.
But yet they've contracted this or they're impacted by whatever health emergency, we're gonna grant them
Pay
the
it.
ability to borrow up to 40. So if I had 5 hours in leave,
Yeah,
I could get granted 35 hours, so the total is 40. Utilize that, but then when I'm healthy and return to work, my paycheck accrual per pay period would refill that bucket, so to speak.
So So if I had 5 hours, if you had 5 hours, you burn that 5 hours and you would only get 35 at that point?
Correct. Yeah. That gets you up to 40 hours.
But you already have the 5.
Right. We're just gonna fill your bucket up to 40 hours total. We're not gonna exceed that 40 hours.
And then you have to pay it back before you can get any more time. Okay.
Up to 40 hours of paid leave from the city.
Yeah, that's why we put in up to. We're not just automatically granting
So they
somebody
might, they
40
might just
hours.
want 10 hours. Okay.
So if they had 20, they give them an extra 20.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, we're just creating that safety net that you're gonna have 40 hours available to you.
To try to get well.
Yeah.
I don't, okay, but I'm not sure that language actually is, but I get what you're trying to do. With a balance below 40, say I have 20, may borrow and utilize up to 40 hours of paid leave from the city to create a balance of 40 hours paid leave, up to additional hours that creates a balance of 40 hours. Not to get too super technical, but I read that as I got 40 hours, I got to 0, I got another 40 hours, the way it's written. But that's not your intent, right? That's not your intent, correct? In writing that?
Our intent is to get you as an employee up to 40 hours.
Right.
To that number, not to
this
get you to
says,
45.
and utilize up to 40 hours of paid leave from the city. Okay, yeah, anyway, just a point.
Okay.
Borrowed hours shall be paid back at a regular, okay.
And you can see up at the
But I'm
top,
just, that's
you
your
see the
intent.
accrual,
Yep.
1.85 hours per pay period. And so you accrue 48 hours, I think, each year is the max that you
Yeah.
accrue.
Authorized use of EABM is actually must be one of the following reasons, requirements. It's a particular key to this edition order. Employee has been advised by. So it looks like it's coming from some of this.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Anyone else?
I think, Stacia,
Mayor?
if you want to explain the
I
donation
think they are.
part.
Alderman Minor, you have the floor.
So I agree with Alderman Peterson that it should state, with approval of the council. And I'm wondering, you're saying that employees do not have to use all their PPL up to access this. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then my next question goes to section G, but I'll wait till everybody else is ready.
I'm ready.
Section G is more or less taken out of our PPL. It's also stated in that language I think it's pretty much verbatim from what we have regarding our personal paid leave time, is that you can donate to another employee that doesn't have any. So say someone that's at 25 hours wants to donate to someone that's at 16 hours, we're going to do the ratio of what that that $25 hour range to how many hours that is to the 16. In the same way, if someone at 16 wants to donate to someone that's up, you're gonna have to use more of his EIAB hours to make up for that $25 an hour rate.
So if Steve wants to donate to you and he's paid less than you and so he wants to donate 20 hours, what was it? Donate employees of the donate
The 20 of his hours may actually only be 15 of hers.
Yeah.
Right, so I mean, he can donate those 20 hours, but that's what it
Yeah, it's gonna be at the rate of the person you're donating
And
to.
conversely, if you donated 20 hours to him, it might be 30,
Right.
whatever, okay?
So, Bill, is that the question you had, or did you have a different question?
Well, where is that in our personnel policy manual right now?
That's what's being requested to be adding it in right now.
It's in the there's a form of it is coming from, if you look under just the PPL, the paid personal leave, there's a portion in there that states one of the letters that's a donation that you can do with PPL hours also.
Okay, I'm in the personnel manual on page 4. Where do I find that?
I don't have mine
So,
personal.
can I ask you a question, Bill? Is your question, where is a donation capability in the personnel file or policy?
Current policy.
Is that your question?
Well, I thought I heard Stacia say that they're just restating something that's already in there.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm
It's
looking
in a
for
different
what it
section.
says in,
Brett's looking it up right now.
What were you saying,
So-
stating the donation capability?
I understand.
There's a portion of it that's in.
I understand,
Yeah.
I understand where you're going with this, but, you know, in other sections of our employee manual, like, paid personal leave, policies and procedures 2.d, it says, an employee can't use their EIAB until they've successfully completed their initial probationary period. So now you're coming over here and saying, but no employees can access immediately. So I think we need to look at what's already in our manual and compare it so we don't have conflicting sections.
I was taking this completely out of something different because it being a health emergency, not just a normal,
Break your leg emergency.
break your leg, fall out of the tractor, something like that. That this is only described for just a health
So
emergency.
that's why we put the language in there specifically that you can access it immediately. And I think there's language in there, at least there was. At one point in time, it might have gotten taken out. One time we had a parenthesis in there that those on probation too, we had a parenthesis in
Oh, it is
there.
in there, including employees on probation.
Yeah. So to clarify that point, because you're right, Bill, we did look at the other sections of the code. But we wanted to,
Provide an exception.
yeah. So that's a perfect point. I agree completely that we want it to read consistently, but we wrote it as an exception to that rule.
And stated it.
And we need to, in my opinion, we need to put that rule in the section that your health-related leave will be reviewed upon. So it's right there. You know what I'm saying?
The section where
In
he's in
that section.
right now.
Well, we want that, I would like to see that language in this section so that you know exactly, you've got all the information to make the decision. You're not hunting for another section for
Both sections
guidance.
should refer to each other.
Right.
Right, is what you're saying?
Well, they should be consistent with one another. This one is weird because you are saying that probationary employees can't access this other leave, but here you're making the exception that under this case, you can because this is a health emergency, not just you want to take vacation.
But then section G wouldn't apply to the health emergency.
No, section G is a standalone section.
Yeah,
That's essentially saying if whatever is going on in your life, you've now exhausted EIAB, you've exhausted your paid personal leave. Once those are both gone as an employee, then a fellow employee in the organization can donate time to you from the EIA balance.
Would that be better put in a different section?
No, because it's related directly to EIAB. G is not a subsection of F. A through G are subsections of the EIAB terms and
Oh,
conditions.
it's right in there, yeah, good
Yeah.
point, yeah, okay. So it is in the, yeah, okay.
So where is section G in our current manual that we're just restating here?
Brett's looking for it still right now online.
Sorry, I got to
He
talking
got
and
sidetracked.
I was speaking and I can't multitask.
The only comment I have is, having worked for state government, I'm pretty familiar with donating of leave to others. We used to routinely get emails from the state human resources saying so-and-so is qualified due to a serious illness, that they're asking for donations of leave. And so I looked, the state of South Dakota has a policy, Board of Regents has a policy, Pennington County has a policy for this. And so I think that section G needs to be spelled out. What's to prohibit an employee who is leaving to donate time to another employee because at termination you lose your EAID? I think there needs to be a checks and balances here. And we should look to what Pennington County does for donations or other municipalities and have a personnel committee that monitors the application and makes sure that all the requirements are met and that this is a serious or life-threatening terminal type illness. So section G, in my opinion, needs to be researched and written more extensively to clarify donating leave.
So essentially throw some restrictions on there.
Because you're creating a liability for the city. If I'm completely out of PPL and my extended illness bank, I get no paycheck. And so now an employee is donating time to me, and now the city has to pay you.
No, I get where you're coming
And
from.
so I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, you know, that if we have an employee with a terminal illness or something, that the city, you know, may want to do that. But I think there needs to be a proper procedure put in place, all the checks and balances done, because it is a financial obligation to the city.
So, Mayor, if I can jump in real quick. So, if you look, and I'm looking at the policy manual, I don't see a reference to donation that's currently in there. I did a little word search under donate. I don't see it. So I don't see it here, but anyway, my point is this, is that PPL is a very generic leave. And that does, upon termination of the employee, they would get that balance. They'd get cut a check for whatever balance is in that account. Okay, so if they have 1 hour, now I'm talking about EIAB, if they have 1 hour of EIAB in their account, they wouldn't qualify for this section G. And so the limiting factors of the EIAB are laid out in section A through F. You know, if you're, section A talks about the first 40 hours of illness. It gives you the rules about PPL accrual and what you need to use first. B is if you have a work injury and illness and how you use that. C is the hospitalization, your ability to use it immediately. That D is, paid out as, it's not paid out as a termination benefit. And then the E is for illness of a parent, child, or spouse. And so those are the rules of EIAB, so that you just don't tap into that as another vacation leave. And so section G is written so that you've got to exhaust both bank accounts. So the rules that guide the donation, before you could donate, all of those qualifying events would have to be investigated first before they'd even qualify to use EAAB. Once they qualify and it's exhausted, then it's just a numbers game. Their number is at 0. Now they would qualify for a donation. And that's if anybody wanted to donate. We're not forcing anybody to donate. We're not adding any additional hours from the city. There's just the potential. And we put the limiting factor in there of saying you can't donate it so much that it takes your personal balance down past 80 hours. We need to make sure that the employee that's donating doesn't get themselves into trouble. Maybe you want to boost that number up to 120 hours. I think if you wanted another rule, you could say if you're leaving service, you can't donate any of your EIAB upon resignation or termination. That would be the way to address that question. But again, we would know, it's highly unlikely but not impossible that somebody who's quitting or being terminated, that we would actually have this need where everybody's zeroed out at a zero balance. Does that make sense?
Or have a medical issue.
Yeah. So I'm fine with a sentence being put in there of saying, look, upon resignation or notice of resignation or termination, that they couldn't just, hey, I'm going to dump 420 account hours into Bob's EIAB bank. Plus you still have accrual limits that your bank account for EIAB can't exceed 720 hours. That's still in effect. We haven't changed that at all. The max you can have in your account is 720. So I think those are great questions. I think the way that it's already structured addresses those, but we could easily add a sentence about the termination or resignation that locks that in place.
They'll just move it.
Yeah,
They'll just move it up. If I knew I was going to quit and I had that and I knew this was in play,
sure, they could do that. But again, unless
somebody
somebody
have to get through A through.
right, unless an employee has 0 of everything,
Yeah.
you can't spend EIA hour like your PPL where
So
you're
you'd have
just
to have that.
going
You'd
on
have to have
vacation.
somebody that had an issue.
A qualifying issue.
Yeah. But it's a good thought process in terms of,
Yeah, I agree
Consistency
with.
with the PPL.
Yeah, I agree with the thought process.
I think it's happened. That's like,
Mhm.
the state
So-
level it's happened.
So I'm gonna.
So Mayor, if you go through what the state of South Dakota does, they require a physician's note, that says the employee's condition does not allow them to return to work for at least a period of 90 consecutive days.
Mhm.
It doesn't allow the employee to get sick leave donation if they've been approved for disability benefits. It also talks about how many hours in total can be donated. So there's a whole number of issues that can crop up with this. It's not as simple as 3 sentences or 4 sentences.
Yep.
I think this needs to be researched a little bit further, and that if we're going to go with this policy, that we do it right and have the qualifying conditions, all the requirements in there, similar to what the state does or the county does to protect the city.
Okay, so I'm just gonna throw out a couple of my thoughts here. The state and the county have a whole different employee base than we do. We're a very small city and we have a limited employee base. However, I do agree that if we're gonna do something, we need to do it right. So regardless of the amount that we're talking about, we do need to do something right. I'm looking at the overall intention of what's being put on the table here today and why this is being brought up. And if I'm not mistaken, the intention of the discussion today really is not necessarily to address the borrow and that portion of our employee manual, but the overall intention is to understand how we can utilize the EIAB bank in a situation like we have today that really relates to a health emergency. So with that being said, I at this point agree with Alderman Minor that I think what we should do is we should take a step back with regard to that one section of it when it comes to the whole borrowing. Really understand the impact in both sections of our manual or all of the other instances. And I get it, right? If we open it up, why don't we make all the changes that we should? Well, right now, I think the most critical thing we need to look at is activating the EIAB for this health crisis. So if we took that piece off the table, if we just looked at whatever minor change that we need to make for section F, and we were able to get council approval to do that, if the council was in agreement with that, I think, yep, it becomes one of those items that we can put on that list and put somewhere, but I do think it would be valuable for us to understand and maybe it's not even a change maybe it's not even a change to the manual itself, maybe it's a process change that we can institute and put in place that everyone knows is there. But I think that would be a prudent way for us to handle it, because our overarching goal today is to see what we can do to get that EIAB enacted for the healthcare emergency. That's my 2 cents. I know I'm not making anybody happy sitting at the table, but that's kind of where I'm coming from on this. Alderman?
So basically remove G for now?
For now.
And add the language, mayor authorizes access to EIAB with council approval.
Mayor authorizes and approved by the majority of the council.
Or council consent. And the reason why I'm going to ask that is what it would take to pull the council together to activate this if we had an emergency situation. I wouldn't want to expend and have a special meeting if we didn't have to. We could set up a process by which maybe it's the president and the vice president that concur with the mayor and say, yep, go ahead and do it, which would result in a couple of phone calls versus just a mayor's call.
I'm more in favor of an actual vote.
So a meeting and an actual vote, okay?
Well, is this, I mean, if something happens, I mean, you can always retro it.
You have the option to retro.
Can we not have a,
I mean, if you were,
can we not have a phone vote?
yeah, I mean, if, you know, whatever is a legal vote.
I mean, if it's legal to do a phone vote.
You can't. You have to have an agenda.
Yep.
So you can do a phone vote. We just need to put together an agenda and have a
You
formal.
put a agenda
Has to be
together,
publicized.
it'll be
You have to
done
go
the next
through-
day, right?
You gotta post it 24 hours in advance. Then you could do a vote over the phone and have just a special meeting.
Have to be a
But-
dial-in available to the public.
Yeah, again, so it's gotta be open to the public, plus, the way our personnel policy manual is, you know, the council's getting paid, you know, everything we need to prep for a regular meeting, it has to go into a special meeting. I mean, we
But I
just
don't-
we don't have all the extra action items and whatnot, but we still have the same process.
So at most, it's a 2-week delay, but I don't see where, is that, I don't see that as critical. I mean, in something like this.
I mean,
If something comes up, we're talking about some pay, right?
Might be so critical to somebody who needs money.
They need it within 2 weeks?
Maybe, I don't know, hell, everybody's waiting for $1,200 now, where they're not out checking it.
Yeah, but my point is, yeah, anyway.
Well,
I'm still in favor of a vote.
You're gonna make that decision between 8 and 5 and get it posted, and within 24 hours, the council can make phone calls and vote.
I mean, if it's that critical, I would think the council
Just putting it
would
out there for consideration.
want to do that.
Whatever you guys decide.
I just don't, it's the people's money, and I think the representation for the people need to be voting on it.
Okay, so that was just something I put out there, so additional conversation from the council. How do you guys want to go with this?
I mean, how does something like this, go ahead, Bill.
I agree with Alderman Peterson that we should have consent of council.
Okay,
And then I think we need to make it crystal clear that you want this to include employees on probation. And so that should be in the first bullet point, not the third bullet point of section F. And that section G should be removed for now.
okay, including employees on probation should go up, okay.
Can that be its own bullet point?
Sure.
That'd be crystal clear, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so bullet point 1 would be,
To include employees on probation.
applies to all employees, including those on probation. And under disciplinary action?
So we have 3 types of employees. We have full-time, part-time, and seasonal. So are you including seasonal in
No.
this, or just full-time, part-time?
It's just full-time employees because part-time and seasonal employees are not subject to extended illness accrual bank.
It's not a benefit.
It's not one of theirs that they're able to get.
So I would spell it out, full-time.
So it doesn't automatically mean all employees then.
Yep,
So what you want to state in here is full-time employees.
yep,
So that could be the first bullet point, full-time employees, including employees on probation. Including full-time employees on probation. Must state somewhere else that it's a full-time a benefit, though.
Yeah, under the categories of employees, it says who is eligible to accrue EIAB.
Doesn't
So
hurt
that's-
to restate it,
So
though.
that's a different section of who has access to it and can accrue it.
okay. Anything else on this?
So we made those corrections and delete G at this time.
Yep.
So I got a question though, so I'm an employee, I get sick today, you gonna pay me tomorrow? That's not how it works,
No.
right? I have to, I will get a normal cycle of the check.
Mhm.
So that's why I don't understand, okay. It's coming,
Yeah.
yeah. They just need to know that you're still getting paid while I'm not expecting a check that day.
Right. I would hope that when you're making your authorization, you're saying that I'm authorizing it to start April 1st in line with whatever health emergency. That's when the executive order came out or whenever that came out to state that
But it's
you're-
still a normal payroll process.
Right.
Yeah.
And if it didn't go into effect at the time that they did get some, on their last paycheck, say that they did use 3 days of it or whatever, and they could have used this, but you guys retroed it back to those 3 days prior to,
So you can make those journal
I
entries.
can make those
right? Or
journal
yeah,
entries
yeah.
and It's not a big deal.
Okay. Anything else on that? Do we have a motion?
Bill, you want to make the motion?
Yeah, I have one more question. The last two sub-bullet points, or whatever you want to call them, it says supervisor approval required. Will the employee have an appeal process for that?
Is there somewhere else in the personnel mod that talks about appeal process? Well, if you,
I don't remember that portion of it in there.
There's a whole grievance section.
Yeah.
So does the grievance section have to be updated to,
so you could just, I mean, if there is a spot where you could just say, if you want appeal process, couldn't you just say appeal process, subject to appeal process by employee, as laid out in section blah, blah, blah?
Well, yeah, in section 9.02 grievance procedure, it does have section 3, employee notice of disagreement. So they would have to file an action within 10 working days,
yeah, so
so forth.
reference
So we
appeal
have it.
process.
So,
So are
is
you,
that what we want someone to do that's in quarantine, taking care of an individual?
You know, you really, hang on.
overthinking it?
So if you have a review process, whether it's called a grievance or not, it's gonna take time.
It could be done later.
I mean, it could be, you know, I don't know the grievance procedure by heart, but, you know, obviously the faster the better. I think there's language in here that talks about the maximum amount of time so that it keeps it going, that you can't take more than 10 days, or, you know, you want to give the employee 10 days to have a grievance, to think about it and submit something in, but it's based on a supervisor decision. But then, you know, within, you know, there's a process in place. If you wanted to make a process specific to this section, you'd have to rewrite it and come up with a new process, is what I'm saying.
I just think it would
If the length of
follow-
the term is too long underneath the normal grievance process, you'd have to create something else in this document for the EIAD later.
But it would follow a normal,
But it's gonna follow the same path as a grievance. You would just be really essentially amending the number of days to get a response and try to minimize the amount of time it takes
So, I
to
mean-
pursue a grievance.
Anyway, appeal, what was the other thing, Bill?
No, I'm just saying that those last two sections have that qualifier about supervisor approval.
Gotcha.
and we do have a grievance process that could follow, or that would follow.
Yeah, if I can just jump in, you know, the purpose of that language is, of inserting a supervisor, is that, you know, we're a city, we have essential services that we need to provide. And so if we have other employees that are sick and physically not able to do the work, and so we're down to a skeletal staff, we need to be able to operationally make a decision of saying, look, we can't approve leave right now because we've got a whole city to provide water and sewer, we've still got requirements upon us. That's the whole point of that, is to force that conversation. And so the employee needs to say, look, this is what's going on in my personal life. The supervisor's essentially saying, this is what needs we have, this is where we're at on this path of this issue. And so we've got to find that balance in there. So it's really just prompting a conversation, because we've got 1,000 citizens to respond to.
Does that help, Bill?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Well, how would you like to see it?
The more I look at this, the more I don't think it's really necessary. All I see is it's just raising more questions and issues, and I don't know.
Okay. Do we have
I
any?
understand that the COVID Act put, this requirement on the city from April through December. I get that. But now all of a sudden we're trying to figure this all out and write something up and give people a chance to borrow leave and do stuff. And this is just going to come back to bite us a year or two from now, because you can't write everything possible. I don't know. Trying to put something together like this, the more I read it, the more questions it raises in my mind.
Okay, any other?
Would you feel more comfortable to table this, Bill?
What I took out of that, Bill, is that you don't think it's actually, the more you look at it, you don't think it's necessary.
Well, I hate to even ask this question, but has our city attorney looked at this?
Great question, Bill.
Yeah.
Glad you asked. And the answer is no. A definitive, I won't even give you the politician answer of evading the question. The answer is no, Talbot has not reviewed this.
Bet we could save $500.
Well, that's the thought process, is that this should be a fairly simple document, which references inherently that there is other sections of the personnel policy manual. My disagreement, or my decision, not a disagreement, but my opinion is that those other sections of the personnel policy manual exist. We can't rewrite everything in this section, nor do we want to. I mean, you're just going to create another document within a document.
No.
It has to, I understand the intent, but at some point you can't throw everything in there. You've got to let some of these other categories stand on their own. I agree with the intent of being thorough and making sure that it really does what we want it to do. But I think by adding too much language, you're just recreating the same exact document within a paragraph.
So maybe I'm misunderstanding, and Bill, maybe you could help provide clarification. Is your position on this that we shouldn't be allowing our employees to tap into their EIAB accrued time for a public health emergency? Because in essence, I think that's what the intent of this was. As it stands right now, we have a public health emergency, and if employees do not have accrued PPL, if they have to be off, it's unpaid. They can get sick and they don't get paid for it. If they have no PPL time accrued, but they do have EIAB accrued, they could potentially tap into that EIAB for time off in the event that they get sick. So that being the case, I think the intention was to try to allow them an avenue to be able to utilize time that they were given as a benefit for a situation where they would be ill, but they normally, or they wouldn't have any time because they've already exhausted their PPL bank. So is that, and maybe that's kind of where there's a little bit of a difference here. I think the intent of this was to try to open up a benefit that they have that isn't available to a public health emergency. So is that kind of where you're seeing, or are you at a different place?
No, Mayor, I understand, but like Section C says, you can use your bank immediately in case of emergency hospitalization, surgery, or inpatient treatment.
Right.
Why can't we just put comma or declared public health emergency? Boom, done.
Well, okay, and here's why. Because we might not have a declared public health emergency in the state of South Dakota. See, there's external factors that are weighing on this where not everybody's handling it the same way. So it's making it really difficult. Like I sat and I heard a city in South Dakota say, could you please just issue a stay-at-home order? And the stay-at-home order isn't issued, but yet people are looking for that and they need that in order to be able to feel comfortable that they can do things. So there's other things that are kind of at play to be able to trigger things. So in simple things like words, right? Public health emergency, public health crisis. You know, I'm hearing that there's like simple words, and if these words aren't used, that sometimes people can't get the benefits that they need. So, you know.
To go along with what Bill's saying on item C, an employee EIB accrual may be immediately assessed in case of emergency hospitalizations or surgeries, and surgeries, comma, inpatient treatment, comma, public health emergency as declared by the United States of America or the state of South Dakota or Pennington County that directly impacts city employees or the mayor authorizes. I mean, just that first paragraph could be added to C without the following shall occur.
Right, but then you also get into the situation where what if you have an employee that's here for less than 6 months? So they have no PPL, they have nothing else.
Or the mayor authorize access, so it's a special extenuating circumstance comes before you. You plead the case and you try to convince the council.
Well, I think that's what they were trying to do by putting a special bullet point in here to deal with that. So it was just another way to try to deal with it.
Because we can't what if the whole thing. There's always going to be some kind of crazy whatever. Mm-hmm. And if it pleads to the mayor and the mayor can convince the council to approve it, done deal. Doesn't matter what it is. I mean.
Okay.
So you just take F and add it to the back end of C, and you've done your thing, and it leaves it open to the mayor and the council's decision if they want to allow somebody to access their EIB. Or it's a public health emergency declared by the United States or the county or maybe we just say that's directly impacts, you get rid of all that, and a public health emergency that directly impacts the employee or the mayor, that the mayor authorizes access and approved by the council. I mean, if it's a public health deal, you can make it that simple.
Yeah, just one comment. I'm not reading into what you just said. I'm just making a statement of saying you want to make sure that if you're authorizing access to EIAB, that council is doing that generally as a whole, as an organization. We're not going to bring to you employees C, here's Bob coming up. It shouldn't be a showcase for him to present his case of why he should get access to it. I think that's a little bit too much, in my opinion. But just general access to it to the council of saying, look, Stacia is the HR person and the finance officer. She has been given authority to administer that program. Because she has all the information. She knows what the qualifying things in That's, I mean, operationally putting that on you guys isn't an efficient use of government.
I don't know that it's
I
that.
just don't want it to go there.
There, yeah, but you could just put that paragraph in there, if it's a public health emergency is declared, keep that and then just end it. And the mayor and the council approves. And then all this other stuff is qualifying deals. So, okay, well, this guy happened to be on probation and whatever, okay, we make the decision to whatever. I mean, I don't know. I think what Bill's trying to state is if you really look at this, then it ends up opening up 15 other questions.
Maybe this is a situation, and it sounds like the council may be in concurrence, that we do get some advice from Talbot, and it might not actually be Talbot. It may be someone else in his office who deals with employment practices on a regular basis that can kind of help give some direction on this.
Bill, when you did your research on the county and the state, do they have a section like this for this kind of stuff? Or did you get that far?
Not for the public health emergency, they have for donation of sick leave.
Got ya.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if the council concurs,
The public health emergency is going to be different depending on what the president or governor or whoever declares.
Right. So currently in South Dakota, the governor has declared a disaster in the state of South Dakota. They have not declared a public health emergency. It's a different thing, and we've taken that into account in our language. Essentially, you've got the circumstance where there could be a health emergency in the whole state, or it could just be in Pennington County. It doesn't have to be in the whole state. So we purposely put it back in there of saying, look, if conditions here for the city, for our organization, are such that there is a public health emergency, that the mayor and the council concurrence can activate this so that we have another trigger in place. It's not just the county, it's not just the state, it's not the feds. That we also inherently, which we always do, have the power to enact this ourselves, because you guys control the policy manual. So we just reiterated that of saying you guys can activate it regardless of what the feds are doing, the state is doing, and the county are doing. Because you think it is a good thing to enact for the safety and well-being of the employees. So I agree, we want to make sure that we get it right. And if it means that we table it and do some more research at the staff level before we engage Talbot, then we can do that. If we want to engage Talbot, we can do that too.
I have no idea if Pennington County has updated their employee manual to include a public health emergency for their county employees, but
Yeah, they have actually. They actually did adjust theirs, and they did not do a very good job, because we've already reviewed that. They did it very early, once this current pandemic was relevant on everybody's mind. They actually adjusted their language, and they made it, for whatever reason, they made it specific to the pandemic we're addressing today. And they already took it to the county commission. They already adopted it, and it already went into the thing. And now they've actually got to go back and fix it and undo what they already did.
Or they get rid of it.
Well, yeah, that's part of
I mean,
fixing it.
that might be why
Yeah.
they did it, it's just to do it case by case.
No, it was system-wise for all employees. They weren't.
No, not that, but emergency case by case,
Oh, okay.
type of emergency.
Sure. Yeah. So last I heard, they're going to have to go back in and redo what they've already done because they jumped the gun.
Oh,
They wrote it too specific to the current happenings and weren't looking forward to, hey, this is a good idea for the future, that we've got these number of hours on the book, so to speak. We need our employees well, and we need them to quarantine and get better so that they're productive in the future. So what's another way to access this, because the current language does not allow it.
so I think everybody can see what the intent is. and the council, is there an issue with the intent with you, John?
No.
How about you?
There's none.
Bill, do you have any issue with the intent?
Nope.
I don't think I do either at this moment. The devil's in the details, I think, is what you're trying to say, Bill. So I'm going to make a motion to table it to get staff time to further review, maybe get some other places and bring it up at the next meeting. Because it's, not that it's not important, but doesn't, anyway.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, Alderman Peterson to table for further research and review. Second, Alderman Johnson, roll call please.
Steve Jarvis,
Yes.
Jim Peterson,
Yeah.
Bill Miner,
Yes.
Yes.
John Johnson.
So,
All in favor?
guys can
Item table.
Yep.
Find
We'll
some
look-
other- you
we'll
can't
look at
have-
it some more.
Discussion item 8B, we've already done the sheriff's report, Hill City Chamber Director's report. Janet, unmute your phone, you're on.
Oh, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can, thank you.
Oh, good, good. Thank you so much. Thank you for the privilege of letting me come before you tonight and present a few highlights to you. I think one of the times, maybe a couple of meetings back, I actually used some of the same words. I'm probably gonna use a couple of them for you tonight, just so you have an idea of where we are. So as I was thinking about all of this through the meeting here, you know, this whole COVID-19 situation has presented our country with many things, many challenges, many things that have united us and brought us together in a number of different ways. As far as the chamber is concerned, and as far as state tourism is concerned, and lots of people's lives and their businesses and livelihoods, their families, events, everything that affects us, we've had, because of this pandemic, actually been forced to take a pause. So, but that doesn't mean that we are paralyzed. So those are the two words that I wanted to add for you tonight, because really, this is a time where we continue to move forward, to be proactive, to be prepared, and to be realistically positive. So that's sort of the framing that I wanted to do for you tonight. Everyone had, and I had a conversation with our treasurer today, the Chamber Board Treasurer, Eric Lind, and we talked about how our banks and our financial institutions who are assisting all of us, our businesses, individuals, we've all been living and breathing COVID-19 for some time now. But that, again, that doesn't mean that we are paralyzed. We are moving forward, and we're ready to meet. If anything, we're even more fiercely dedicated to providing resources to our members, to our community, to stand united with everyone. So with that, you had a chance, I hope, to read a short report that I provided for you. And if you look just even at the executive summary or at the short-term focus, that really tells you the story of what we've been doing and how we are going forward. The information has been coming down daily and sometimes hourly. And just to give you an example of how important the Chamber's resources are for our business community, I've spoken to you about this before, but it's really, really an interesting observation and communication. We send out our newsletter, our Chamber newsletter, weekly to about 275 members and other associated constituents who are interested. From there, it also gets shared out to other organizations' members. So the interesting thing about that industry standard, about people who read Chamber newsletters, or any newsletter for that matter, the industry average is 27%. Your little chamber has a readership of 273 that we send out. Our consistent average hovers, and I'm proud to say this has been raised ever since I've been here, but it hovers around 53 to 54%. The industry average is 27%. with COVID-19 and the resources that we have shared out to our members, I didn't dive into my computer because I didn't want to lose my screen to refer to it. But I think the highest that we had was a 64 or a 67% readership. And that's pretty amazing. I know that in the past, a lot of other organizations, other chambers, some of our tourism friends, they all kind of marvel at that. And even though we're small, even though that's a small number, that's pretty significant. And it's one that I'm very proud of with what it is that we do for our members. So again, just you can see from that the short-term focus, we are at an inflection point, or we're getting very near to it, where we are starting to see, and I think we do all have reason to be hopeful, that things are starting to move in the direction that people are considering more so than they were a month ago, their travel plans. They haven't given them up completely. They have they put them maybe on pause or rescheduled, like some of our events, but we are getting calls now, and we are getting requests online for information. And our engagement rate with our Facebook post today, we put out one, we're keeping our message intentionally inspirational, soft, giving people reason to dream, to visualize, and just the post that I put out this morning, and it was about 4:30 in the morning, I put one out, and we've got 2,300 people, almost 2,276 people that we have reached with that, and 435 people that have engaged with that. And what were the pictures? The pictures were of sunlight, after the dark sun, after the night sunrise, after the winter spring. And we've got the bison camp, we have an aerial shot of Hill City, and that is performing 95% better than our other posts on our Facebook page. So that just tells you that people are looking for those kinds of things to get them through this crisis. And I also want to tell you about another way that we are connected. We are connected all the way across our country with our leaders. Senator Rounds, we've been invited to listen in on and participate in calls with Senator Rounds. There's one tomorrow with Senator Thune. We have a host of webinars and resources, links that we have shared out for our members, webinars that we want our members to engage with and be a part of if they can. They can also watch these things after the fact if they don't have time right now. But we are moving toward that point where when that demands and when it's safe for everyone to travel, again, we're ready to be able to jump on that opportunity and be ready to welcome and greet those guests when they come into our state again. So that's kind of the long and the short of it. And if, again, I'll just reemphasize, if nothing else, this has made us even more fiercely committed to what we do, how we do it, to improve every single day, and to be the best resource that we can for our community and for our members, our constituents. So with that, are there any questions that I might be able to answer for you?
No.
So Janet, I just have a really quick comment for you. Unfortunately, I think the readership numbers that you have access to are actually fairly light, even though they're pretty spectacular based on what you told us. I can tell you that your newsletter has a wider spread than you can even imagine. Many of the organizations that it's sent to send it out to their members, and now people are depending on that to understand what happens in Hill City. So you do a wonderful job with that. I want to commend you on the voice of communication that you have been during this virus. You have been instrumental in working together, not just as a chamber representative, but as a part of our community. There isn't anything that goes on that you don't know or that you're not aware of and that you aren't positioned to share. So thank you not only for being an employee of the chamber, but for also being a very valued member of our community.
Wow, thank you for those very kind words. I really am very grateful to you for that. One thing that I'm working on right now, I started today, I've reached out to one of our residents who has a gang of mask making members. So part of my work is to get some Hill City positive news out to our media And it's about all the ladies, everyone who is working very hard to provide masks, surgical masks, caps, responding to the call for those donated items. And there's a whole host of other things that are happening that we're trying to share out as well. But for instance, recognizing Kroll's and all of the people there, the frontline employees. I mean, there's so many good news stories, and that again just illustrates how it is that we are connected as a community. So again, I thank you for those kind words, and thank you to all of you for what you do for us. So I hope that you all stay well. Be well.
Council, anything?
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you, Janet.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Okay. Action item 8, discussion item 8C, COVID-19 financial impacts. Stacia and Brett.
I don't know. You want me to?
Tag team it.
I don't know.
You want me to start?
Go ahead.
Okay. So, Janet just referenced it, talking about our revenue impacts and whatnot looking forward. Stacia and I have been sitting down, and we've been doing this now weekly for the past at least 3 weeks, 4 weeks, about trying to get a sense of what all this means with revenue impacts. Obviously, we've got businesses that are currently open, but they're doing social distancing. We've got other ones that are closed, and they're not necessarily closed because of the COVID-19, but they're just closed because seasonally that's where we're at. Our first 6 reports or deposits of revenue from the state have looked great so far this year. But we know that is probably going to change. We just don't know exactly by how much. And so we're monitoring it. I guess this conversation is just that we're monitoring those dollar amounts to kind of understand better where we're headed, okay? So the downside to this is that we don't really get our first big revenue check until latter June or first part of July. Because our season really starts Memorial Day weekend, and it's for that weekend, and then we've got kind of traditionally a lull of maybe a week where there's not as much traffic, and then it ramps up for the season. And then once people are collecting those tax dollars, then reporting them, then submitting them to the state, a few weeks later we get that report and we see that reality of it. So, we're looking at end of June, first part of July to see that first major impact of how potentially our season is disrupted or not disrupted. Like I said, so far the numbers have looked great. They're actually up from last year and the year before. So when we look at these numbers, we're really looking at, okay, we know that between property tax revenue and sales tax revenue, that makes up 90% of our general fund income. And so we've been sitting down saying, okay, what if we took a 25% reduction in sales tax? What if we take a 15% reduction in property tax? We're making some assumptions, but again, it's like throwing a dart at a dartboard. We don't know what that exact number will be. Maybe it's a reduction of sales tax by 26%, or 42%, or 15%, or 14%. I think the main thing is that we understand those numbers and we keep looking at them. But really when the mayor and I were speaking about it, and Stacia, the three of us, one thing that we do know is, what if it's horrible? What if we lose everything or almost everything? Well, we know that that's not going to be a reality. Kroll's Market is selling things like crazy. The convenience stores are open. People are buying gas. We know that Dollar General is open. So we know that there are some businesses that are still functioning, that are still generating sales tax. So we're going to get something. It's not going to be 100% wipeout of all of our revenue. So, but if we look at those numbers and try to come up with maybe a worst case scenario, we've got funds in that emergency fund that we've been talking about for years that we identified the dollar amount of $750,000 to use in case of emergency. That money is there. In my mind, the worst case scenario that I have in my mind wouldn't exhaust that whole fund. We would still be fine. Okay, so that's where I'm at right now. That we have the funds and the wherewithal as a city, even if it gets really, really tough with tax revenues, that we as an organization can still function throughout the rest of the 2020 budget year without a problem. Okay, that's the gist of it. That's a very bigger picture, high level assessment of it. The other thing that is a reality is we wouldn't be right, we wouldn't be doing our jobs right if we didn't look at the budget and said, okay, what are those things that we probably don't need to spend money on so that we can conserve and minimize expenses? And so when you look at those things, we're looking at travel and conference attendance. Well, most of those are canceled. I think in each department there's probably $2,000 to $3,000 just earmarked for expenditures, hotel stays, registration fees, and whatnot. I mean, you're looking at $10,000, $15,000 of expenditures that are going to be saved there because no conferences are going on. Now, they might get postponed and they might happen in the fall instead of the spring. There's other projects that are on the books that we need to look at. There's money in the budget for garbage cans. There's money in the budget for the mowing contract. There's money in the budget for, what else did we look at? I forget. I'm just throwing out, the bid board stuff, going out to bid for the bid board projects, for the restrooms and the asphalt for the alleyway. Without tax revenue rolling in from the hotel $2 per room night tax, we're not refilling those coffers of the bid board. And so we have about $200,000 in that bid board account, but it's potentially not going to be generating that $2 per room night tax to pay for whatever that project's actual cost will be through a bid. So do we need to go out to bid? Do we want to go out to bid? What does that look like if we do go out to bid? Maybe we bid it out and say, instead of completing it by the end of 2020, we ask that the contractor finalize it and finish construction by the end of 2021. Those are conversations I'm going to be starting this week with our bid board to get what their reflection is of some of those projects and bring those recommendations to you guys. Because I think we need to be very careful of signing up for $400,000 worth of debt, $600,000 worth of debt, whatever it is with a brand new project, and not have that revenue stream come in. But I sure hope that the hotels are full in July. They're still talking about doing the fireworks at Mount Rushmore. So I think it's a cautious optimism of essentially saying, look, we're weekly looking at those numbers and seeing what the reality is of it, and that we need to take measured steps of not only preserving that revenue as much as we can, but also minimizing those expenditures as much as we can. And a lot of that stuff we can do operationally. But there's some things that you expect us to follow through on, like the bid board project, maybe the mowing contract, some other expenditures,
Bridge project.
Bridge
water
project. Those things are all on the books and progressing, and eventually will be a financial liability against the city. Some of them are no-brainers, like the bridge project. We're getting free money, even though it's costing us $200,000. We're not having to expense $800,000 because of it. And so what Stacia and I are saying is that we've got some measured decisions to be made, and we need to look at these things and just be aware that they're coming up on the horizon, but not get too bent out of shape, and have that cautious optimism that we can still do the things that we want to do. But operationally, we can sure tighten our belts without much interaction with the council, saying, look, these are the things that are operationally we probably just don't need to address right now, and wait for that day that says, yeah, we're back to normal. Maybe we can still get it done in September, October, whatever. And so we just wanted you to know that we're looking at all this stuff and that we are following the numbers and the reality of the situation. But I can't sit here and guess that our revenues are going to be down 60%. I can't consciously support that with data. I can't consciously support that we're only going to be impacted by 5% reduction. What are property taxes going to do? Is the thought that everybody has an automatic escrow account that is paying for taxes automatically? Well, yeah, a lot of people do that. But there's a lot of people that pay it out of their pocket because they want control of it, and maybe they're willing to take a late penalty, keep some cash in their pocket, and pay it late. And because they need the money now because they're out of a job. And so we're trying to go through those scenarios in our brain of what's coming, okay? And so, again, we just want you to know that those questions are bubbling in our brain, and we're going to need some, depending on what happens, we're going to need some specific direction as to what projects we either advance on or we don't. Probably the biggest one for me right now is the bid board. We are ready to go out to bid again for the asphalt work in the alley and for the restrooms and for the addition. I'm concerned that we don't have the $2 per room night tax coming in if this continues the way it is. But that doesn't mean that it couldn't change within the next month, and we're packed. I just don't know. So that's the gist of it.
Yeah, well, I think there's a hierarchy of things that get knocked off as the severity or less severity, and so appreciate you taking a look at that. Start tightening the belt now, what you can. I mean, get rid of whatever non-essential, I don't know what that is, but even if it's small amounts, get rid of it. And, or whatever, in my opinion. But make that list, and if it's as far as the bid board, they're gonna borrow that money, right?
Well, the intent was if we needed to, we could borrow it against cash reserves of the city. But if we don't have, if we're worried that our cash reserves are going to be exhausted,
so that's not probably going to happen anymore.
We don't want to borrow against money that we need to keep the organization afloat.
And just in rough numbers, what is the general the general budget number? Just rough.
I've been, we've got 700.
That depends. That depends on the sales tax and the general fund.
You're talking about like cash reserves?
No, just what's the budget for this year for the general fund?
Okay, so there's about $900,000 that comes in revenue for sales tax. There's another $555,000 that comes in property tax, approximately. And then the other 10% of the revenue is miscellaneous.
Right, so those are the two main things that could get impacted, one more than other.
Correct.
Likely.
Yeah.
And so what was it, 9 and 5? Rough numbers?
Yeah.
9 and 5.5.
Yeah,
So that comprises of 90% of our revenue. The other 10% is another 100,000-ish, whatever.
Yeah.
And a lot of that's already been paid in that other 10% because we get liquor license stuff and whatnot.
So we have about half our budget in reserve.
We have a designated $750,000
Roughly.
for our emergency fund. And in my mind, when I run like what I think might be a worst case scenario, we shouldn't exhaust that completely and still be able to run the budget like we intended.
So it'd have to be a 50% hit.
It would have to be more than that, I think.
75%.
In order to exhaust that fund, it would have to be more than that hit.
Well, it's 750, right?
We've already collected a certain dollar amount, and I don't know what that number is year to date.
But
So I'm just
to
looking at
to that 900 and that 550 or 1,500 or 1.4 or 1.5.
Mhm.
That's what's over the year.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, in my
and
mind,
I know we got some monies in, but the sales
Yeah.
tax and the is pretty minimal coming into.
Right. What's going to get hit primarily would be sales tax.
Mhm.
I don't envision that property tax is going to get hit near as hard as sales tax.
Could get delayed.
Right.
Like we were mentioning.
Correct. Yeah. So
I can see people doing that.
my idea of a worst case scenario has sales tax taking the bigger hit,
Mhm.
with a more minimal hit going to property tax.
But all I was getting at is essentially that 1.4 or that 1.5 that we expect to take in this year, if that diminished by 50%.
The whole thing about by 50%.
I mean, that's what
Yeah.
that's.
Correct. We've got 750 to replace what we didn't collect.
That's, from
Yeah.
what we're, anyway.
Yeah. So again, I agree completely with you. We've got operationally decisions that we are making and will make to minimize the impact to the budget. We're going to need some discussion and decision-making assistance from you guys of the bigger ticket items. And when we go through the laundry list of stuff, and quite frankly, there's not much, that's on that list. We don't have a big purchasing, there's not a big purchasing equipment or anything on the calendar this year. It's really was related to research of infiltration in sewer lines, which when we solve those, we're actually saving money. The other one is the bridge. And then the other one is the sidewalk expenditure. Once that hits, is paying that back. When we know that's 85% completed. We're not going to stop work on that. We need to get it done. So there's not much else in the budget of any consequence other than knowing contract and potential new exposures like the bid board, going out to bid.
Sidewalks a drain.
Pardon me?
The sidewalk projects is going to be a drain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But we know that those are expenditures that are already on our books that we need to pay. We're already committed into those.
Right.
So, but again, we've got funds to cover those because they're built into the budget.
Outside of the 750.
Yeah, I mean that number to pay for the sidewalk and the bridge are in this year's budget. So even if we take the 50% hit, like you say, and need that emergency fund, everything still gets paid.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's outside the 750 emergency fund. Essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, it would get backfilled and it would get paid. So, again, we just want to make sure that you guys know that we're looking at it. We're also participating in the county call-ins, the governor call-ins, the federal call-ins for this COVID-19. There may be grant monies available to municipalities at a future date where they kind of did what we did back in 2010 with the shovel-ready projects, where we did the water line looping, and we got debt. We got a $400,000 loan or $350,000 loan to do the water line looping through the trailer court on the south side of town, and extend it out the water services. And it was a loan for $350,000, but after the project was done and the first payment of debt was due, it was debt forgiveness. We didn't have to pay for any of that stuff. So if they do another program like that, we might have an opportunity to plug some of our other projects in to get that same kind of a deal and benefit from the federal government because they're looking to stimulate the economy. So we're looking at that kind of stuff. We're looking at what grants and other things are going to be available to us as a municipality. My gut tells me there are going to be municipalities in this state that will probably go bankrupt because of what's going on. And they're going to need the state to come in and save them. We're not one of them. We're not going to need saving by any means. We're financially secure. But there may be programs that are appropriate for us to get engaged with and move forward on. And we'll learn because the Fed is going to dump that money into the state is going to administer it, and we're going to have to somehow qualify for it. So that will unfold as all of this comes around. I mean, they're going to work on their fourth stimulus package and their fifth and probably a sixth before this is all done at the federal level. So, unless there's any questions, that's all I had, unless Stacia wanted to add.
The only thing I would say is as you develop those lists, you get them out to us. So we don't, so we can start.
Yeah. Like I said, the first one I'm going to ask you for is input and direction about the bid board projects. That is.
But what does that cost the city?
It's a liability against our cash reserves.
It's against your debt limit.
No, it's not the debt limit. we are essentially, if we go out to bid and sign an agreement with a contractor to build the restrooms and it costs, let's say it costs $600,000. We're now on the hook for $600,000 worth of additional debt that we're gonna have to pay for. And if our revenues don't come in, we've got cash reserves that we could probably absorb it through the various funds and whatnot, but you don't have any fresh cash coming in through the door with sales tax being generated by the businesses.
Potentially,
here.
there's obviously gonna be a downside to that, I mean,
Right.
right? But the bid board can go borrow the money from somebody else.
The way that the approval of that bid board project was put in the resolution and adopted was that we were going to borrow internally. We had to make that choice
So,
when
but I mean,
when
that could be,
package,
that could be a change.
it would have to be amended and
Yeah,
go through a
and they could
process
go bond, they
potentially.
could go bond for it and pay that interest.
Potentially, yes. We'd have to investigate that. Right now, we told them,
I'm
here's,
just throwing out that
Yeah.
maybe we don't wanna be the bank anymore.
right, yeah. We would have to investigate that and see
Doesn't
if
mean
that
it
makes
has to
sense.
stop. I guess is what I'm saying.
Sure, and I'm not proposing that. I'm saying we
No, I
need,
get it.
we
You're
need to
looking
look at it, because that is the biggest liability that we
Where's-
could put on our plate.
Yeah,
You know,
If we have to
if
be-
the building is 600,000 and
I get
the asphalt in the alley is another 3 or 4, we're now putting out $1 million worth of debt.
which we have the ability from a debt limit standpoint.
Correct.
I mean, we have that capacity, but they could go borrow from somebody else
Correct.
and use that
Yeah.
and guide that money to pay that and structure that in a way that that project still continues.
That
Wh-
could be an option.
Whether it should or not, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be about the city borrowing the money.
Yep, yep.
Well, it could,
But that is our project with the most exposure right now.
Right, and I get it. But that's almost a pretty easy one to talk about. But there's things that you could be doing is in terms of, overtimes and all this other stuff and just really watching at things.
You know, one of the discussions, if we extend the construction deadline date to the end of 2021 instead of 2020, we might get a better price. Because there's contractors that are still busy today. Even though all of this is going on, they're still working because they've already locked in agreements over the past year and a half. And so they're busy, but maybe with this slowdown, there's not gonna be as much work looking out
Some
6
things might
months,
not
8
got-
months, 10 months, 12 months,
Right.
14 months. It might be a great opportunity if we are patient and we're okay with it being extended out to the end of 2021. We might get, instead of a $600,000 project to build the restrooms, maybe it's 4.5. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, there's lots of options probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we've got to work through those things and say, yeah, let's still go out to bid, but maybe we can get this cost benefit, making a big assumption that our tax revenues are going to normalize over the next 18 months or whatever it is, and we get a heck of a deal as long as we're just patient.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Bill, do you have any questions, Alderman Minor?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So I'm looking at the bid board 2020 budget, and it says general fund loan transfer in $438,100. So is the general fund loan from our emergency fund of $750?
No.
No.
It's not. 750 is strictly emergency. So that other money is loaned out of other cash reserves.
Like what?
General fund cash reserves. We
How
have
much of
more,
that?
we have more money than just the 750 designated or earmarked for an emergency. I don't know what the exact number is. I don't know.
Well,
I'd like to add if any council.
as I sit here,
Oh, go ahead.
as I sit here and listen to this, I'm kind of baffled. So Governor Nolan today said the numbers are shocking from the state sales tax collection and lottery sales. So I can't imagine the state budget is going to be in good shape when she's out there saying the numbers are shocking. Pennington County has asked all their department heads to come back to them by Friday with their 10% budget cut plans. They've already implemented hiring freezes and some other things. They've taken away employee raises. We got a notice just yesterday the Black Hills Playhouse season has been canceled. And so I can't imagine that Hill City's revenues aren't going to be impacted. I understand you can't say that it's going to be 5%, 20%, whatever, but they're going to be impacted.
Right.
And so I went back and I looked what happened with the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, and the state sales tax took a 10% hit that year, 9.8%. Pennington County's was actually flat. I couldn't find exactly what Hill City's did. But the news that I've had from various business owners, and I have been talking to business owners these past couple weeks, is not good. You know, locals can only buy so many gift cards to keep them sustained and things, you know. So I think to sit here and say, I think we can weather this, you know, we have some monies in cash reserves, I think is kind of naive. I would much rather institute some cuts now than wait till August or September and we say, gee, our numbers are really bad. Now we've got to dip into all our reserves trying to pay our bills and float. I'd rather be more conservative at the start of this, and then if things turn out better than everybody's anticipating, then we can go back and say, all right, we'll release some money. I'm not of the opinion that we can just continue to sit back and watch. That seems a little bit like the Titanic to me. We'll sit here and watch the ship sink and then decide, yeah, we should have done something. So I'm in favor of, I think we had $40,000 in the budget to put the mixing unit in the low side water tower. I think we had some money in the street budget for doing some repairs and crack sealing. So there are some bigger ticket items that we could look at holding up. I went back and just looked. Our payroll alone is about a $600,000 obligation just in salaries. And then you add employee health insurance and all the rest of it on top of that. So I don't think that just saying, you know, we're not going to go to a conference and save a few $100s here and there is really what we should be looking at. As far as priorities, we've already committed to what, almost $350,000 or $400,000 more in the sidewalk project. We know we're going to get stuck with that bill. The water tower is a priority as far as I'm concerned, because that not only deals with our TIF, but it deals with fire protection from the town. If we had a major fire, I don't think we'd have enough water supply. So I think that if nothing else, we need to institute some kind of every 2-week meeting, maybe appoint a council representative, the mayor, the finance officer, whoever, sit down and really start going through these numbers and seeing where we're at and focus strictly on the budget so that we're ahead of the curve and not behind it. And I'll warn all our organizations that for Triple B money. I said it last year that the giveaway was not sustainable, and it's not gonna happen this year. There's gonna be cuts to our organizations. So let's have our organizations start preparing, because money's gonna be tight. So that's my thoughts.
Okay.
Mayor Kathy,
Yep,
may I make a comment, please?
absolutely. I think
I
that's
wanted to also,
Janet, right?
yes,
Okay.
I just simply wanted to reassure the council, and you may have noted it in my report, that the chamber has already been taking a look at this for over a month. We understand, and we very much take to heart what Alderman Minor just said about anticipated cuts. So we are doing our due diligence. We have been working very closely with our president and our treasurer with the chamber, looking at alternates and all different scenarios where we could be affected. So I just wanted to reassure the council that we have already started that process and have been in discussion with that for over a month.
Perfect.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Janet.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else from anybody?
I just will reiterate, get the list going.
Okay. All right. Nothing else, let's go ahead and move into report items. So Common Council, let's go ahead and start with Alderman Minor on the phone.
Nothing.
Okay, Alderman Jarvis?
Nothing.
Alderman Peterson?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Alderman Johnson, nothing. Okay, I'll move to myself and I'll make this relatively quick. We are continuing to have the conversations like Brett had indicated with the governor. We had one on Friday, which I believe is the first of many, with other mayors and other representatives in the area. I know that there was a comment today in public comment about businesses being opened and things like that. So just to reiterate, we have a resolution in place that is asking that we follow the CDC guidelines. So there's nothing that's demanding any type of action from any of our businesses. If we look to what's happening in Rapid City, I'm expecting that we see something in the next couple of weeks from Rapid City that may actually be a relaxation of what they have done. So we may see some movement relative to some of that. I just don't know where it's going to go at this point, but I do watch the TV like everybody else does and continue to see the escalation in numbers on a regular basis that continue to be east of the river. The last thing that I wanted to add is I did receive an email, and I'm going to send it out to all of the aldermen so they have a copy. It's from Connie Sunby, and I don't want to read it word for word, but she is asking about the streets and when the streets are going to get paved in their area. So this is again an example of something that may need to be looked at, and it may need to be something that, because of the situation that we're in and the reduction that we're going to be taking in income, needs to be something that isn't going to be addressed in the very near future. So as aldermen, when you get questions like this or when you're out there talking to people, I'm hoping that you've tried to help people understand the situation that we're in, what we're going through, what our economy is going to be looking like. Echo some of the words that you heard Mr. Minor say and what we need to be looking at, and help people try to understand what's happening in our town of Hill City. Other than that, I had nothing else to add, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Stacia.
I did the work comp audit. We're getting a refund of $1,540 this year. Also, I received an email from the Secretary of State. They are planning on sending out absentee ballot applications to every voter in the state of South Dakota. They should be going out sometime this week. The application is to, if you would like to have an absentee ballot, which is what they're pushing for, fill it out along with a copy of your driver's license, mail it back in, and then the ballot then will be sent out to you directly at home. Pertaining to our election, we had no race for our mayor, as Kathy was the only one that put in a petition. We have no race for Ward 1, as Carl Doty Jr. will be filling out the remainder of the 2-year, or the 1-year term, the 1-year remainder of the 2-year term. And then there was no race for Ward 1, as Jason Gillespie was the only candidate that turned in a petition for that one. As Ward 2, for that seat, we had 2 petitions, Dale Householder and John Johnson, and they will both be on the ballot as of June 1st, or June 2nd election.
Okay, thank you, Stacia. And now I'm going to turn it over to Brett for a very quick update on the remaining projects.
Main Street Sidewalk Project, this cold weather really kind of puts a hamper on what they're able to do as far as pouring new concrete. They're primarily working in the Desperados and the Diner Eric block right now. They poured some footings last week. They're putting up that wall, the forms for the wall this week. Weather is definitely going to be a factor for them this week. Next week looks much better. We have a weekly meeting here at City Hall on Mondays. This week we had it today because of the holiday. So Mondays at 8 o'clock. They are approximately a week to 2 weeks behind on the project because just weather related and whatnot. So we're probably not going to hit exactly the May 1st deadline for the project. But it's coming along pretty good. The crews knows what they're doing and they've got all the experience of the prior block. I think we'll have a wait for the railing just because it takes so long to manufacture the railing, but it's moving forward. Things are looking good. It's progressing and it'll be wonderful to have it in place once it's done. Business improvement project. We are ready to go out to bid for both the alleyway and the restroom in addition for the senior center. Essentially, I need to coordinate with the architect and with the engineer to pick out future dates and how we want to present it. And so we'll be working on that. Like I stated earlier, I want to get feedback from our bid board members. I'm going to call them individually so we don't have to hold a meeting, and maybe based on the discussion, if we do need to have a meeting, we'll have a meeting. But get their sentiment of what they'd like to do and how they'd like to see the project go forward. I can explain to them our budget concerns and kind of have that discussion and bring their thoughts back to you. Should be able to do that by the next council meeting. So to me, that's at the top of the list because it is a project that's ready to go. So that's the bid board project. Water reservoir project. Kayla has completed all of the document refurbishing that he needed to do and all the bid letting documents associated to that, and that's been turned into rural development, so it's on their desk waiting for their next step to go into the process. There is no timeline as of yet as to the bid letting on that. But again, we've completed everything that we need to as far as rural development requires. So that's where that is right now. And we did also, and this is work that's already been done, we revised some of the elevations for the tank location to give a better picture for the construction piece of it once the contractor is building the foundation for the tank. So just a little bit of clarification on that, but that's already done. Major Lake Bridge project, I was in communication with the state DOT. The U.S. Forest Service finally got back to us with an answer of their environmental and archaeological impact review of our bridge project because it impacts the Major Lake Dam and spillway. The challenge is that they want to have more archaeological assessment of the property because the spillway does qualify as a historical, and the dams qualify as a historical structure. And so I've worked with the state archaeological people to make sure that that process can be completed. I should have that answer in the next week. And then I can give it to the state, and then that one's going to be pretty close to going out to bid as well, because that's the final piece. All of the engineering and everything is done on that. So that one's moving along quite well. Just with this environmental, well, it's more of an archaeological review. So
Okay,
that's
When
it.
was that built, the dam, do you know?
I don't know. I don't know offhand.
all right, no other business? Meeting adjourned.